I'll call the meeting to order and have our clerk call roll.
Yep.
Bartlett.
Here.
Hirsch.
Who you would call it?
Kittleson.
Here.
Swadley.
Here.
Johnson.
Here.
Reeves.
Here.
Majewski.
Here.
Jensen.
Here.
Truel.
Here.
O'Connor.
Here.
There are 10 alders present with Boersma and Engelberger absent and excused.
Thank you. Are there communications from our alderpersons this evening? Alderperson Majewski.
Just wanted to let council know that at the last council meeting, we had voted to look into a economic development director, and I said that I would go through personnel to start that process, and we have done that. The personnel director is at this moment putting together information on different communities that have economic development directors and or consultants, and just wanted to let you know that the process has started, and it'll probably be another couple of sessions before we have any kind of information ready for you.
Right, thank you. Alderperson Reeves.
On a related note, because it was also on the council themes, and one of the requests from the council was, it came to the council, CACP, so we also have, I just sent an email to Lana to send out to solicit some feedback from the council as far as what the council would like to see as roles and responsibilities, which may help the personnel committee, may guide in terms of which model. So that should be coming shortly.
Okay, thank you. Further comments or communications? I have two good news items, and at Stoughton Rotary, you'd have to pay $1 to share a good news item. I don't have $1 tonight, so I'm just going to share. Our IT director, John Montgomery, is here, and John is the man behind the window. So, where are you, John? Can you come on out and say hi? Maybe he's shy. No, there he is. Welcome, John. Hey, John.
Oh, John.
Nice to see you all, and thank you very much for the opportunity. And I've been telling Mayor Olson, very excited.
And we're excited to have you here. Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you.
Good luck.
Back behind the window with you. There he is. Also, good news. Opera House started selling tickets to members only yesterday. It's the members only time right now. And after 9 hours, only 9 hours yesterday, they had already reached 40% of their total projected revenues for the 17-18 season in ticket sales. Wow. Exceeding what they had generated last year. So yeah, great news. Stoughton Opera House is doing some really good things. And that's my good news. All right, we'll move on to public comment period.
Did you want me to touch on?
Oh, I'm sorry, Matt, I moved right past you. An update from Attorney Dregney regarding your work on the Landmarks Commission on Chapter 38 Historic Preservation Ordinance. Thank you.
Yes, very briefly, I talked to the chair of the Landmarks Commission about the status of their work on the project. They had some work to do before I meet with them again, and she said they're working on it, but they wouldn't be ready for me this month, so we're looking at next month for me to regroup with them and keep the process moving.
Great, thank you. Okay, now I'll move along to public comment period. We don't have anyone registered to speak tonight, so we'll go on to the consent agenda. Our consent agenda tonight consists of the July 25th council minutes, the July 20th joint meeting of the Committee of the Whole and the Stoughton Area School District Board.
Move to approve.
There's a motion by Jensen. Is there a second? Second by Hirsch. Would anyone wish to remove an item from that consent agenda? Seeing none, all those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. There is no old business this evening. New business starts with Ordinance 8 of 2017 from our Public Safety Committee for a first reading. Alderperson Truel.
Thank you, Your Honor. Public Safety brings forth for the first reading Ordinance 8-2017, amending Chapter 70-176, parens 47 of the City of Stoughton Municipal Code, relating to parking restrictions in the Business Park North. Again, Public Safety approved this 5-0, and this is a first reading. This effectively will be cleaning up some action that was done a number of years ago regarding the parking, the ability of one of the tenants to use some on-street parking and the like. So he'll come back to us in a couple weeks.
Alderperson Maskey.
A couple sessions ago, I had requested that council consider a standing committee for planning. And as part of that discussion, the mayor had said that we didn't really need a standing committee, and one of the reasons was that if there's a ordinance that needed to be developed that had anything to do with the work of the city, that it would go through Public Works. Sounds reasonable. So my question is, this is a parking issue. Did it go through Public Works?
It goes to public safety,
Did
not
it go?
Public Works.
Your argument was that because it impacts how Public Works does its business, that ordinances generate through Public Works. Did this ordinance go through Public Works?
This ordinance, and I may have misrepresented, what I had intended to say was ordinances go through a standing committee. Ordinances doing with parking go through public safety.
And how
Other
does,
types of ordinances go
and how
through
does that,
Works.
how does that ordinance change impact Public Works?
I don't know that it does, Alderperson Truul. I don't know that this ordinance, can you help me? Affects Public Works at all.
Well, other than, again, on-street parking
Yeah.
in the business park.
Right, and it has to do with traffic flow, which, as a conversation with Police Chief Leck and others who are required to monitor and to maintain parking ordinances, violations.
I'd like to make a motion to table this until it goes through Public Works because of the fact that it will impact Public Works.
In what way?
In the wintertime for this plowing. If they're doing street construction.
So,
If
point
they
of
are
order.
doing a number of different things.
So the point of order would be is this is on for a first reading.
Exactly, and it shouldn't even be here
So
yet.
if you're gonna make a motion, we'd have to waive the rules first. And we can do that, but since it's a first reading, what I would suggest we do is just run it past Director Aber and just have him take a look at it and see if it will impact, and if it does, then maybe it should go to Public Works for consideration.
I'll be having the same discussion
I was going to say,
for the other ones.
this is a different process. Parking regulations has always gone through public safety.
I understand that, but the point when you were making a very succinct point.
Yep. Yep.
And I'm bringing it, and the reason I'm doing this is for a very specific reason also. It's to show you the problem that you have with that, with your arguments sometimes. And this is one of them. This impacts more than one committee. It only went to one. We're talking about an ordinance, not talking about a small budgetary issue or something of that matter. This affects more than one operation.
I respectfully disagree, but I'm not going to get into it at this point. Alderperson Truul.
And we'd both be wrong if I agreed.
And again, Tom's asking a valid question. Again, from a standpoint of cleaning up, as the packet in the background indicates, this was actually approved in 2014. The signage was put out there, and so in terms of the restrictions and what's been going on, having said that, in the way the parking requirements are set up, it takes an ordinance change to enact, again, any change in the on-street parking and the like. And so that was the intent. But I'll certainly, again, this is a first reading, and whatever council wants to do, we're good with it.
All right, there was a motion on the floor. Is there a second? Seeing none, that motion dies for lack of a second. We'll move along to Ordinance 9 of 2017, also for a first reading from Public Safety. Alderperson Truul.
Thank you, Your Honor. Public Safety also brings forth Ordinance 9-2017, creating Chapter 70-176, Pren 73, of the City of Stoughton Municipal Code relating to parking restrictions on the north side of the 300 block of West Taft Street.
And this will be back in 2 weeks for further discussion. Agenda item 7, Resolution 115 of 2017 comes from Public Safety. Alderperson Truill.
Thank you, Your Honor. Public Safety brings forth Resolution 115-2017, authorizing and directing the proper city officials to issue a Class A fermented malt beverage license and a Class A liquor license, cider only, to Quick Trip, Inc., doing business as Quick Trip number 893, located at 1359 U.S. Highway 51. And I would move approval.
Second.
Motion by Truill, second by Jensen. Alderperson Truill.
Again, this is, we had a nice discussion about both this license and some of the others, making sure that we're consistent in the types of licenses we're giving to convenience store type projects, and would encourage your support of the motion before us.
Thank you. Comments or questions regarding Resolution 15? Council President Swedley.
Thank you, Your Honor. So I guess my question is related to the map. And the question would be is, from looking at it, it appears that this would be staffed separately than the rest of the convenience store. Is that accurate?
What page? There's the map.
The map is on 12 of the PDF.
I'm sorry, Lana.
I believe, but actually, Tim, what you're seeing is we actually took up the Quick Trip requested more than just a typical beer and cider, and so we had a second application before us that would have created more of a typical liquor store, and in that setting, we would have had to have separate controls, separate everything.
So is that, what are we seeing in the packet?
So Quick Trip had sent in the application for a Class A intoxicating liquor license with a Class A fermented malt beverage license initially. Being that the city has consistently not allowed convenience stores or gas stations to have intoxicating liquor, we had discussed with them that they should apply for the fermented malt beverage and then the Class A liquor license, cider only license. So this drawing that you're looking at, it has a section behind the register highlighted. That would have been in the event that they were allowed to sell intoxicating liquor. It would have been kept behind the counter, but it'll be consistent with the other stores, the other Quick Trip stores where the beer is in a cooler and maybe out in that area that you see out there, and it can be locked up after hours and things of that nature. So
Okay.
This application is just for Class A fermented malt beverages and then cider only, so like hard ciders.
Okay, perfect.
As the other ones are.
Thank you.
Yeah, and as you see in the packet, we actually did take the other application. We recommended denial 5-0.
Okay, and thanks for doing that, because that is consistent with what we've done in the past.
Thank you. Additional comments or questions regarding Resolution 115? Seeing none, all those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Resolution 116 of 2017 also comes from our Public Safety Committee. Alderperson Truill.
Thank you, Your Honor. Again, this is always the unique way we have to bring this forward. The Public Safety Committee recommends, brings forth Resolution 116-2017, authorizing and directing the proper city officials to issue an operator's license to Sheila Trentini. And I have to move approval. So if I get a second on that, I appreciate it.
Second.
There's a motion by Truill, second by Jensen. Alderperson Truill.
As you'll see in the packet, the Public Safety Commission actually recommended denial. And I think within the packet, you can see some supportive information. Sheila is here, and we encourage her to come and speak. And with your permission, Your Honor, I would encourage her to do so.
If you'd like to step up to the podium, please.
Kind of scared. It's a pleasure seeing you guys all. I just want to speak that we're trying to change the brick house over to a banquet facility, and where they asked me to run that. And I have bartended for 30 years, and I really enjoy it, and I'm good at what I do. I have MS, so I have a ticket to work, and so I'd really like to get up and do something for the community too, because I'm trying to help the children there get out of the motel, and it breaks my heart.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Alderperson
Could
O'Connor.
I ask a couple
Oh,
questions?
Sheila, I think.
So you're bartending now, is that right?
Yeah, but I can't without a licensed bartender on premises.
Okay, so this would give you more flexibility.
Yes, by all means.
When was your last violation?
My last violation was 10 years ago, and I did everything I was supposed to do. I got released early, and I don't drink, I don't do anything, so I just like to be a good person.
And how long ago was your release?
9 years ago.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Further comments or questions?
I think Scott had a comment.
I'm sorry, Scott.
I was going to
Alderperson
say,
True.
I don't know if there were any other questions of the applicant.
Thank you.
Oh,
I guess,
Alderperson
so
Hirsch.
you don't have, you had a DUI way back in 1996, and you haven't had any DUIs since then?
Oh, no.
And your employer obviously knows about your other convictions and is okay with
Yes.
everything? And how long have you been working at the brick house?
About a month now.
Okay.
Yeah, and she just came to me day before yesterday, and it's kind of hush-hush, but she's going to go get a license to make it a banquet facility because the bar is just not doing well, and the clientele is not so hot there. So I told her that because I ran banquets for a number of years for Babe's Sports Bar, and so she asked me if I'd head up the banquets and work all the banquets and stuff, which would be wonderful.
And you would need a bartender's license?
Yes, because I'd be doing the hors d'oeuvres and serving and bartending.
Okay.
Thank you. Alderperson True.
Again, I don't know if there are any other, I don't have a question for the applicant. I don't know if there's any others.
No, I'm not seeing any. Thank
Okay,
you.
If not, thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Then, Your Honor, and again, we did take this up within the packet. You can see the chief isn't here this evening, but you can see the chief's statement, and basically his recommendation was to deny based on again the applicant's history that you can see, and also that he felt that the applicant didn't fully disclose the past history. So while the motion is to approve, I would encourage you to vote against it. I believe this applicant certainly has the compassion and the interest in doing what's up. Having said that, being kind of consistent with our past histories, the ALRC or the public safety recommended against the granting of this license.
Thank you. Additional comments? Alderperson Hirsch.
Yes, I mean, Scott, maybe you can clarify, as Chief Flex does not seem to be here tonight, when he said that she did not fully disclose everything, what was not disclosed? Because we don't have privy to that, so
Sure.
we're not getting the full picture here.
And I guess I'll ask, Lana, I don't know if you have anything more. I mean, we have what's in the packet is the applicant's application identifying 3 previous charges, again, 96, 2001, and 2008.
If you take a peek in the packet, I believe it's page 5 is the letter from Chief Leck. And he discusses in the second paragraph that the forgery charge is in there, and then he also talks about 4 prior OWI convictions on the application. There was only 1 listed. So when applicants apply for an operator license, they are required to disclose all of their prior convictions.
Okay.
Going back a number of years, especially when they're substantially related, such as an OWI.
Yeah, thank you. Sheila.
We know when the
In just
last
a moment.
OWI was. Was it the 1996? I mean, because there's only 3 lines here, so I can see as an applicant that you only put in 3. If you have more than that, maybe that was a mistake on her part. But if there's more, I mean, are there more recent Do we have that information?
I was not
I
given
don't
that
have that.
information, no.
Do we-
Sheila, if you wanted to make a comment, I need you to go to the podium, please.
As to not disclosing it, I was told by my employer I only needed to go back 20 years. So that's what I did.
Okay.
Yeah.
Alderperson Hirsch,
Well,
additional comments?
I guess, we've had a mixed kind of record on, with public safety with this. I guess you have an employer that's supporting this woman. Her last offense was 10 years ago. When is it enough that a person does time and gets, how are people supposed to get jobs if their past lives never leave them? And so I think what we've done before in the past was to give them like a probationary license for like 1 year. And if that comes back okay, if there's no DUIs, no other charges, and then they can reapply next year and that's what we've done, I think, a number of times last year. Anna?
So the license application that's in there is for 1 year currently. So if it is approved, it would be 1 year, and then she would have to renew next year before next July.
So, and then that would still be for 1 year after that, or is it a yearly basis?
Renewals are 2 years,
Okay.
but new applicants are always 1 year.
So I guess based on the information and knowing that it's been over 10 years, she has nothing within the last 20 years with DUIs, we have to, and you have an employee that's willing to hire her, I think, I'm going to vote for this, for that 1 year probation and, see what, based on what we've done before.
Further comments? Alderperson Reeves.
Well, I had a question because I do understand what Regina's saying, but I also see in Chief Fleck's comment based on City of Stoughton policy, and I'm not clear what that policy is, so if we're approving outside of a policy, then I think we
I
need
can
to
answer
consider that. Did I miss something?
That's Chief Lex policy.
Yes.
It says City of Stoughton
No,
policy.
that's Chief
what-
Lex
It's-
policy. Anytime there's any conviction,
Yep.
he always
I'll have-
denies.
I'll have Lana speak to that as well.
There's a policy that
Yep.
chief follows,
Yeah.
but it was approved by the
Absolutely.
council back in 2011. So that's the policy that he uses when reviewing operators' licenses. So,
Yes.
And just to
Attorney
clarify,
Jordan.
just to clarify that policy, so that policy was intended to give guidance to the chief with respect to how he should go about making his recommendations to council. It's not a policy that's binding on the council. The council can make an independent determination.
Sure. Alderperson Truul and then O'Connor.
And again, just as a frame of reference, I think Regina's right. I mean, we should look at things along the way, and you should make a decision yourself as to what is important. At the committee meeting, I followed the chief's recommendation, but I was also one of the first ones to encourage her to come and speak tonight, because again, I think it is. These are tough decisions because we are impacting, an applicant's ability, as Regina said, to get certain employment, so I don't take this lightly, and I encourage you to think about what's up, because there are unique situations. There are times when we've had folks. I know in the 2 years I've been on the committee, we've had folks that did things 20 years ago, and the chief and you've heard me vote against the chief on some of those things because it's folks that have had some instance at that point, and again, the chief was following his policy and recommending because of some unpardoned felony 20 years ago that someone couldn't get an operator's license today or be a manager at a liquor store or other things. So I do encourage you to take this act. Think about what you'd like to do, and we just don't have a hard and fast rule. Obviously, the chief has a consistent policy, but ultimately it's up to us to try and figure out what might be in our best interest and in the best interest of the applicant.
Yep. I know Alderperson O'Connor has something to say, but I wanted to let you know that the policy's on the screen.
And it's on our website.
And on the website as well. Attorney Dragney had a quick comment, or long.
It's,
could be.
I think it's more a question than a comment. I haven't been involved with this process, but I know the chief has at times drawn distinctions between cases where you're simply examining someone's history, they are eligible for a license, you have the opportunity to make a judgment about whether to approve it or not, taking into consideration past convictions, for example. But he's also talked about circumstances where someone is not qualified based on the nature of the record. Is this a case where he's saying the applicant is not eligible for a license, or he's simply recommending denial based on, and that, I don't know the answer to that. Is he calling this an eligibility issue?
It says, based on the City of Stoughton policy and the fact that these violations are considered substantially related to the licensed activity, I'm recommending the applicant be denied an operator's license.
That doesn't sound like he's saying the applicant is ineligible.
I don't believe that's the case.
Alderperson O'Connor.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. This policy was developed a number of years ago, and it used to be the procedure used to be that all operators' license used to come to the council. And that got to be too much of a burden, and so to pare that back, the Public Safety Committee at that time structured a policy so that only the ones that there may be a question about comes to the council. So that's why it's here.
Thank you. Further comments or questions regarding Resolution 16 of 2017? I think this sounds like one where there will be some questions, so we'll vote by roll call.
Just want to explain again.
Okay,
So
just
again, the
to
motion
explain it.
is to approve.
Yep.
So if you're voting affirmative, while the committee recommended denial.
Right.
I got a question. So
Yes.
if I vote yes, I'm voting for her to get the license?
Yes.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Ready?
Yes, please.
No.
I'm sorry, Regina,
Yes.
you had a question? Yeah, the
A
motion
yes,
is
a yes
to-
vote is to,
denial.
right,
Yes.
but the motion, the way we have to bring it to council is we have to bring the ordinance
As
in an affirmative manner.
Okay.
Yep.
So this is as simple as a yes vote is to award the license, a no is to not.
Correct. All right. All right, Lena.
Hirsch,
Aye.
Kittleson,
No.
Swadley,
No.
Johnson,
Aye.
Reeves,
Aye.
Mieski,
Aye.
Jensen,
No.
Truul,
No.
O'Connor,
Aye.
Bartlett.
Aye.
That motion carries on a vote of 6-4, so the motion was approved.
All right. Resolution 17.
No. Good luck.
Resolution 117 of 2017 comes from our Public Safety Committee. Alderperson Truul.
Thank you, Your Honor. Public Safety also brings forth Resolution 117, authorizing and directing the proper city officials to approve a temporary Class B/Class B retailer's license and special event license to St. Anne's Catholic Church. And I would move approval.
Second.
Motion by Truul. Is there a second?
Second.
All sorts of seconds all of a sudden. We'll do a second by Jensen.
Well, they have to ask
Alderperson
us
Truul.
twice.
Oh, I know. Didn't hear it there. Alderperson Truul.
This speaks for itself. Again, the chief indicated that we have not had a problem in the past, and he did recommend approval.
Questions or comments regarding St. Anne's Festival? All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That motion carries. Resolution 18 of 2017 also comes from Public Safety. Big Public Safety meeting. Alderperson Truul.
Thank you, as opposed to a plan commission meeting. The Public Safety brings forth Resolution 118, 2017, authorizing the council approval of a policy. It's attachment A, implementing section 14-38, Parens A of the Stoughton Municipal Code relating to fining of late arriving annual liquor license renewal applications. And I would move approval.
Second.
It's a motion by Truul, second by Jensen. Alderperson Truul.
This is, thank you, Your Honor, by the way. This ended up being a very real discussion for us last month as we were getting to the end of the calendar year for our permits, and we were struggling. Literally, it happened that they expired on a Saturday, and on Wednesday evening, we still had a number of licenses that were still outstanding, had been picked up and other things. And so it got us talking about our overall policies for renewals and how we handle things. And so I would turn back to Lana to talk about kind of where this came from, but I would encourage you to, this really just kind of cleans up our policies, and it also will give us a chance to send them out to our license holders so they know, again, how we handle renewals and fees and the like.
Thank you. Lana?
Sure. So currently, the city has a section in the code, 1438 Parent A, that already talks about how to handle when applications for annual license renewals come into the clerk's office. And currently, the cutoff date or deadline is April 15th. And now, you can move that based if it's a weekend date or not. But the ordinance also states that if the applications are received by our office after that date, we do impose a $25 a day late fee on the applicant. So just to kind of lay out the process for the clerk's office, we send out renewals every year, usually within the first week of March, sending out a letter explaining the date and things of that nature. So they get a little over a month for this paperwork. So this is just sticking to what the ordinance says, kind of laying out a process for the applicants, letting them know when that will be imposed and how we go about implementing that. So again, this only applies to annual liquor license renewals. This isn't for anybody new. This isn't for temporary licenses or anything of that nature. This is solely the annual renewals.
Okay. Thank you, Lana. Alderperson Hirsch.
So I guess I'm a little, need a little clarification. So if the application is after April 15th, there's a $25 a day fee, but also there's a $25 a day fee if their payment is late as well on June 15th. Is that what I'm reading?
Yes.
Okay. So when do you just deny it? If they don't get their application in and they haven't paid, when's the cutoff? Because isn't this, the number of these liquor licenses limited?
Mm-hmm.
So when do you actually say, we're not waiting anymore, we're giving it to some other business?
Well, there is the I don't want to say threat, but there is the possibility that if the applicant did not turn in their paperwork on time, we would not be able to do the proper checks. It would not be able to go to public safety in time for consideration, would not be able to be published in the paper for consideration. So at that time, it's just that they basically haven't applied for it. And then at the time it expires, June 30th, it would
Just expire?
It would just expire, and it
Okay.
would be surrendered effectively back to the city because nobody applied for it.
Okay, thank you for
Thank you.
clarifying.
Alderperson Johnson.
Thank you, Your Honor. Being on the committee, I found out how much work Lana was doing. And it was crazy on how much she was trying to follow up and call. So to her credit, I think we're just trying to make things a little bit tighter so we have standards so that they can't come back to us. And it's inexcusable not to be able to, that they're not worried about this part of it and that she would continually have to keep on calling. So thank you for in the past, but we're trying to make things a little bit clearer and so she doesn't have to do the multiple calls.
Correct, thank you. Alderperson Truul.
Thank you, Your Honor. And again, part of the awareness, at least for me and I think other members of the committee, was we were getting to the end of the year, and to your point about trying to be Lana and the city trying to bend over backwards to try and provide people effectively their lifeblood, their license to function. And we literally were talking about, because of the expiration was going to be going into the long weekend, the 4th of July weekend, and that people could have been shut down, we were looking for other ways, and even the chief had indicated perhaps people could come and pick up their license at the PD department if needed. And that's when we realized that again, that's another one of those chances for us to check and make sure they're paying other things and running the checks. And so it really got us talking about kind of our overall policy. And again, to Lana and her team's credit, they really do a great job of trying to make this work. Having said that, there is a point where we need to create some disincentive for people to keep taking advantage of that. And so I would encourage your support of this.
All right, thank you. Alderperson O'Connor.
Thank you, Mayor. How widespread is it? How many people didn't pay the fine or the fee to make the application on time?
That didn't make the application on time for
Yeah.
the annual renewal.
Right. Talking a couple, or are we talking a bunch?
I don't have the exact number off the top of my head, but if I had to guess at it, just late arriving applications, I'd say 10, 12. And that's just not that they're not into my office on time or into the clerk's office on time, rather. It's that they're in the office and complete. So, signatures aren't missing, or, pages aren't missing, or, because we send the applicants everything they need in March, and we need to get that back right away to get it sent to the PD for checks.
I think the $25 is a fairly light penalty when, I think we used to dock them a day for each day they were late.
It's true.
Right, yep, exactly. Yep. Council President Swadley.
Thank you, Your Honor. Well, I certainly agree that something needs to be done here. My concern is basically you're sending out the certified mail on right around March 15th, and you're looking for applications to be completed April 15th, which is 30 days. And as a business owner, I know that not all business owners pay their bills within 30 days. It's usually 30 days from the end of the month. I think our business might be the exception. I have a very efficient bookkeeper, in case she's watching. And but I would say that for business owners, it might be helpful if we can send out this certified letter maybe earlier. That would give them, a full month, because a lot of business owners don't even think about paying a bill for at least 30 days or some 60, and even the worst case, I've worked for companies where they didn't pay anything before 90 days. And it may be a situation where, it just gets thrown on the pile and they're not even aware of, what it is. And I don't know if you've had any feedback from them, or if you think that would be helpful.
So the policy is referring to just them returning their paperwork to me. They don't actually have to pay for the license in full until June 15th.
Right.
So it's just making sure that they have their paperwork filled out and turned in to me for public safety to consider and the council consideration. They don't have to pay for their actual license until June 15th.
Do you find that most of them pay at the same time, or does the check come separately?
Usually a lot of them pay at the same time because it's, again, get it off the plate and then it's done and they don't have to worry about it when they come pick up their license.
Okay, thank you.
So that's just a suggestion. I don't know if it's a good one or not, but I do know that that does happen out there.
Yeah, and we put in there March 15th, but I'm usually on it about March 3rd or 4th.
Okay.
So I want to make sure that they have enough time to review it and get it done too.
Okay, I have Alderperson Hirsch and then Truul.
No, he
Okay, Alderperson Truul.
And I was going to just respond to Tim's comment. Again, this is getting the paperwork in. It's not a financial thing, and it's really a case of babysitting. We just had an applicant who was looking to get a license to work. If we're talking about your license to operate, and you can't find a way to get your and knowing that it happens every year, I have a tough time thinking we need to send it out any earlier.
Okay, thank you. Further comments regarding Resolution 18?
One more.
Sure.
So we had this type of discussion when I first was on the council, I know at that time we had to rewrite the ordinance. I think Attorney Dregney was part of that discussion. It's been a while because we had some bar owners that were looking at, serious penalties that was really going to be detrimental to their business. And I know that's not the intent here. And I just want to make sure from a legal standpoint that what we're acting on here isn't anything that's inconsistent with what we should be doing.
There's nothing that's problematic from a legal standpoint about the policy as it's being presented. I have discussed it with both Lana and Chief Leck. It's been a little while, but we reviewed it, and as I recall, it was fine from a legal standpoint.
Thank you. Any additional comments or questions? Otherwise, all those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. This motion carries. Resolution 19 of 2017 comes from our Redevelopment Authority. Alderperson Truill.
Thank you, Your Honor. The Redevelopment Authority brings forth Resolution 119, 2017, a resolution approving the summary report of the Redevelopment Authority of the City of Stoughton regarding the sale of the property located at 314 West Main Street in Stoughton, Wisconsin. And I would move approval.
There's a motion by Truill. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by O'Connor. Alderperson Truill.
Thank you, Your Honor. For those of you that may be saying, okay, Scott, what happened? You voted against this proposal at RDA. What we have before us now is a much cleaner offer, and it calls out, again, some specific times and a specific indication of assessed value. The intent, again, the brief history, the long history made brief, is, again, this is the property that's commonly referred to as the Marathon site that the city took control of, the Redevelopment Authority took control of years ago. Took down the Marathon building, received some grants to help clean it. We have been looking for a potential buyer for years. Again, as you see with the financial information that is included in our packet tonight, this isn't a win. But frankly, I'm excited about the fact that we might actually bring this property back online. It's an important piece of property on Main Street. We had hopes at different times as we talked to different businesses and had a couple of other folks that were interested at different times that perhaps they could make a larger project by acquiring other property or doing other things. At the end of the day, what Mr. Nelson is bringing forth is a proposal to bring forth a couple more 4-unit residential units on Main Street. We've got a unique situation on the property because we do have an easement that runs across the east side of the property to serve a garage on the adjoining property. He's aware of it. He's trying to make this happen. He is very aware of the fact that as you look at the this offer, this conditional offer, some things have to happen. He's got to bring plans forth that the city staff can review. It'll then have to go before the Plan Commission. He's going to have, we'll get the opportunity to really see what the project is going to look like before we'll issue a building permit. And again, that all has to happen before he closes on it. Second part of this is there is a clause in here that gives us the opportunity, if nothing happens, for us to take the property back next year, which I thought was important. So at the end of the day, as a part of this proposal right now, this development is promising to assess out at least $800,000 by the end of next year. When we first started going back and forth with the offers, we actually had hoped that he was going to be able to break ground, and he had hoped that he was going to be able to break ground yet in 2017. Obviously, that's not going to happen now with everything else that's there. So if you've got specific questions, I'd be happy to take my best shot at answers, but I would strongly encourage us to move forward and make something happen on Main Street.
Thank you. RDA President Peter Sveem is here as well. So, comments?
Questions?
Alderperson Kittleson.
So the question I would have, and I don't know where we would bring this up at, but is this the same person who has the property that's next to Wells Fargo?
Yes.
And do we know if he's finished that property? Has there been any notices for stuff that needs to be finished there?
Once again, Rodney, I'm doing well tonight with not having staff folks helping me out here, but I know that we've had that discussion, and Rodney and Planning Department staff have had that question asked of them. I'm not sure where they're at in terms of enforcing, trying to get, the last of the, I believe there's landscaping and some other exterior finishes that I don't believe have been done yet.
No, haven't been finished. So the question I have to go farther on that is, so do we know the height of the 2 4-unit buildings that he's going to build?
We do not, and again, that's the point is, that proposal will have to come through plan and come to us to approve.
Okay. And then the other thing I would ask, it's basically then, so you're going to sell us 25 cents on the dollar is what we're selling this for?
Effectively, yeah.
It's a little under that, but yeah, so, I don't know, I guess I would like to have those other questions answered, if he's had notices to finish other property and if it's been done or not before we go on with this.
I don't know that answer. I don't know that answer, I'm
So
sorry.
could we table this then?
If you so choose. Alderperson Johnson has a question, and we can come back to us. Alderperson Johnson.
Thank you, Your Honor. What I have a problem with, and I know there are certain procedures that we do, but because we are council, it seems like the planning department has so much power in what happens before we even get a say in what's going to happen. If that makes sense. Like, we don't get a say in the size of the buildings, the height. And what I'm concerned about is we have a really nice area over there with single-family homes. And it's not going to be up to us to be able to protect the image of the single-family home area if it's just going to go to planning department. Or can somebody answer that if a council will have any say on what these buildings look like, or the size, or the height?
Attorney Dragney, can you help us with that?
What I'm not certain about is what zoning approvals will be necessary for this. Do they need a rezone? Do we know that? And so, assuming they need a change in zoning, that would come to council. If they also need, if beyond that, they need some site plan approval, as I understand it, site plan approval is the Plan Commission's purview.
Peter, maybe you could give us a little, help us out with what the plan is for the redevelopment of this parcel?
The plan for the buildings?
Yes, please, if you have it.
Hi, Danny.
Hi.
I don't know if I know a whole lot more than Scott. He's given us an idea that he'd like these buildings to at least resemble the cultural center that is almost kitty corner. I don't want anybody to get the idea that it's going to be identical, but I think that's the theme he wants to follow. The Planning Commission is better versed in this than I am, but I'm assuming there's a height restriction on multifamily. And as far as the size of the building, there's only so much room on the lot. So that's, the lot is going to limit, the lot's limiting already, but the lot is going to limit what he can do as far as mass. I think Scott also pointed out, I think we've been marketing this for probably around 5 years. We have 3 different commercial brokers. Dennis, your point's well taken. It's not a great price, but maybe it's the price that reflects market value after all this time. I think the market has spoken because we have not been able to get anything more. We started out higher and just have not been able to find anyone interested in taking that lot. And frankly, there's just better choices that are more expensive, but they're nevertheless they're better commercial lots than this one. I think what we accomplished is getting rid of the eyesore, not only on Main Street, but a very badly deteriorated home to the north. So we accomplished what we were supposed to do, and that is clean up a problem. We had an old gas station, a dirty gas station that had been sitting idle for years, and then the house again to the north was in terrible repair. So I think we did what we were supposed to do. We just have not been able to get the price we want, and we couldn't do it more quickly enough to capitalize on the remaining life of the TIF. So if something would have happened sooner, we would have had a longer time period to recover our cost, but we're only going to have, I think, 3 years, Tammy?
3 years.
3 years to get a TIF recovery, so it's just kind of a perfect storm where it hasn't worked out financially as well as we'd hoped, but we did accomplish getting the corner cleaned up. And I know Mr. Nelson would like to move ahead. I think we started working with him in May, so it's been a kind of an arduous process going through the steps to get the documents prepared the way that we were both satisfied with.
Thank you, Peter. Alderperson Johnson, you had additional questions?
Yeah, not for Peter, thank you very much. Appreciate it. My question is, and my fear is, if I was a residential person that had a single-family home and I had 2 4-units built right there, and not being able to see the plans or anything prior and having it just go to planning on that and having us only be on zoning. I wouldn't, personally, if I had a house, I would not want to have 2 4-unit buildings built right beside my house. So I know you don't have a lot of say in it, but I just wish the council had a little bit more say in what can go there instead of.
Can I address that?
Yes, please.
Tess, for a long time, we were really holding out, and I know Regina agrees, I think, that we were holding out for mixed use. And perhaps maybe a 4,000-foot envelope that would have a couple, 2,000-foot retail businesses on the main level and then apartments up above. So I don't know, as far as being a neighbor to either 2 4-units or a mixed-use building, I'm not sure there's a win-win exactly.
I'm just concerned about the neighbors and the backlash once they hear about it. So, I don't know if something we can do.
I get it.
Thank you, Peter. I have
Thank you.
Alderperson Reeves, Majewski, Kittleson, and Hirsch. Alderperson Reeves.
So a couple things, and I know in finance, we talked just a little bit about this, but, I mean, our clock is ticking, right? I mean, in terms of, at this point, I mean, we're cutting our losses, and each month that goes by, there's, we have our financial, the money we've got out is shrinking as opposed to what we're or growing as opposed to what we're bringing in. So I guess that's something that seems to be pretty straightforward. But I also know, when we were looking for houses, we saw some houses we ended up on Main Street, and we did see some houses ourselves that were just a little bit off of Main Street, but surrounded by commercial. So I think, they are surrounded by commercial properties. So while I appreciate, I don't know that it's a huge surprise because that's kind of the environment there in terms of what the neighbors may be thinking. So.
Thank you.
That's my thought.
Alderperson, were you done? I'm sorry,
Yes,
I didn't mean to
done.
cut you off. I thought you had,
Nope,
you had
done.
stopped. Alderperson Majewski.
I want to do some revisionary history first. I just started council when this, I'm going to call this a project by RDA, came about. And one of my biggest regrets I have ever had on council was voting for the demolition of the residential structure that was behind the Marathon station. It was not in bad shape. It was structurally sound. I know this. I've been in the construction business for quite a long time. I remember our past finance director gleefully saying that it was a terrible building, and it wasn't a terrible building. My concerns were, and always had been, the impact of pushing residential property into the residential area. The impact it had on the property that was now fronting what will be commercial property. Unfortunately, I can't do anything about that. However, I think we can do, as to sell this, we could put contingencies on here for setbacks that are different, higher barriers, more vegetation buffers. I would like to see that put in before we sell this. I know that it's above and maybe above and beyond what ordinance says, but we are the sellers. We can do that. I think it's only fair to the people who are now living up against a commercial property who had no say-so in the matter, who we basically steamrolled and dropped their property values on. I think it behooves us as a council to give them some economic relief, at least in the way of trying to mitigate as much as possible an intrusion into their residential area.
Can I say an amen?
No.
Okay,
not
I
this-
know, I can say
Yeah,
that. No,
no.
I didn't say that.
Alderperson Kittleson.
I guess I have a couple questions, and would be, Tammy, if we were to hold on to this property, not sell it, how does that really affect us?
Well, then you lose all of the costs that you put into it, the total of $313,000.
Okay, but if we're getting 25 cents on the dollar, that's not that great of a return on it. So the other thing I would look at is maybe we think outside of the box. It was taken down, so now we have a clean slate there. If you look at our community, and I know I've talked to other people about other communities, we have no public restrooms up and down Main Street. There isn't anything there. Is this the best location for that? Maybe not. But we might need to start thinking outside of the box here a little bit instead of putting up these taller buildings that could possibly sit there. And I'm going to refer back to 25 cents on the dollar. I mean, I just don't like that return. And I would say, okay, you know what? So we are $300 and some thousand in the hole, but what could we do that could actually better our community and use that as an investment that is forever? And not worry about the $390, whatever the dollar amount is. But that could actually add a little bit to our downtown community instead of having a building put up that's going to be higher and have people living behind it and really taking a shadow away from all of that. So I guess, excuse me. So I guess that's where I would kind of go is maybe we think outside of the box and not do this return.
Thank you. Alderperson Hirsch.
I just, and Peter and Scott, maybe you can remember, I thought when Mr. Nelson was proposing these are 2 4-unit, only 1-bedroom apartments, so the footprint is actually kind of not that big, and it will have its own parking. And I thought, he also said that he talked to the neighbors behind because of that shared possible access or easement, and that they were okay with it, if I'm not mistaken. And maybe you guys can remember what he said more so than I can. But with that said, I don't see these buildings being that tall because they're just 1-bedroom apartments, not 2 and 3. And so it might, I can't remember what the size was. Do you remember if they're a 2-story or 3-story? I don't remember, because I know they were going to have parking underneath.
Right there, Scott.
I don't think we've seen a drawing, but my guess is it'd be a 2-story building.
Right. That's also my belief. The other thing is back to something Peter said. At the end of the day, if we maxed out the site, we could, when we were looking at a commercial side with what was necessary, the total footprint there was 4,000 square feet. That was the biggest single building we could put on there. So if we've got 2 buildings and with the respective access that they're going to need and things like that, they're going to have, they can't physically have footprints more than perhaps at most, a couple thousand square feet, 1,500 to 2,000 square feet as a footprint for each building.
Thank you. I have Council President Swadley, Alderperson Bartlett, and then Alderperson Kittleson.
Thank you, Your Honor. Well, I think many of the concerns that have been raised will either be covered during the rezoning process. I believe there's typically a public hearing for the neighbors would have an opportunity to address any concerns that they may have. Having said that, I think that almost anything that'll go up there is better than what was there before. And same thing with a lot of the building and the zoning and the setbacks, those types of issues, will be addressed through our ordinances. So I don't see that as too much of a problem. I certainly would like to see if things are completed on the other project that Mr. Nelson's working on, and I don't know if it's inappropriate to try to attach that to this project in some way as a contingency or not. I mean, I would like to see him wrap that one up if we could. And I don't know if this is the venue to do that. The other thing would be to possibly, I guess I have a question about the TIF request, or the TIF amount. This is the only property in that district? Is that how that works?
The only property left in the TID?
Yeah.
I guess I don't know if I remembered.
I mean, is the plan would be to close this district after this property is sold?
You thought about that at all?
No, I haven't thought about that at all. I thought we would probably wait till the time that it's ready to,
Well,
the final.
yeah, we wouldn't close it early.
No, we would
Or
wait till.
recapture some of those costs.
Right.
So I guess that's my question, is what else is in this district that could possibly make up the gap, if anything? And if there's not, how do we address the shortfall here? Is there a plan to borrow money from another TIF district, or what, I mean?
Yeah, I haven't
Yeah.
gotten that far yet.
In fairness to Tammy, I don't think she's been in that deep, but I know that as over the years, and we've talked with Lori about this, we're going to have access to other TIF districts to make up our loss. Because this has been a loser almost from the start.
Right.
So it's just a matter of how bad the loss was going to be.
Well,
That's how
it's a-
she was going to fund it, Tim, was the other TIF.
So it's a loser on this particular property, but we don't know if the district as a whole is a loser, if this is the only thing in it.
I don't believe the rest of the district is a loser. I think the rest of that district owes like $360,000
General fund?
to the general fund. And our audit that just took place in June, July, said that they would recommend that this TID actually pay the general fund back that $360,000. So the TID or the TIF in that area is doing okay. This property, and like most redevelopment areas, I don't think you redevelop an area thinking that you're going to make a lot of money out of it. I think that's one of those ideas, Dennis, when you go into the property, you clean it up and you redevelop it, and you try to redevelop what's going to be on it, in the hopes that something will come on it. And you're right, sometimes you give that land for that better assessment, that $800,000 that you're going to get later, and you don't get back what you put into it. It doesn't sound fair, but that doesn't always work that way.
May I comment?
Please.
Tim, you mentioned, I don't know much about Nelson's project on Van Buren, but if there aren't any loose ends on that project, it'd be inappropriate to attach them to this. If there are loose ends over there, I would expect the
I know that
city
staff is
department
working with it, yep.
to get it taken care of based on ordinance, but it has nothing to do with this, and this shouldn't be attached to this.
Well, I think the reason it was brought up is, I mean, we like to see things completed before the next project starts. And I think that part of it is appropriate. Now, it may not be appropriate to use this as the venue to do that, but I would like Mr. Nelson to understand that if there are things that need to be addressed, as a council person, I'd like to see that done, because that was the agreement on the other property, and why would we want to approve another one and potentially have the same conversation next year?
I understand, and I can say that I know that Mr. Nelson, he told us at RDA that he fully understands the hoops he has to jump through between, in front of this body as well as Planning Commission. So if those things are to be addressed, that sounds like you're going to have an ample opportunity.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I have Alderperson Bartlett, Kittleson, and then Truul.
Yeah, I wasn't here when this came down, so I don't know the whole backstory of it, but I'm going to support it because we've been talking this year a lot about infill and getting some more housing around here, and I think to place extra requirements on them at this point, I think would be against what we've been discussing here all year, trying to get more of this construction happening. It's not the best financial terms, but it's what we're going to get. You said you've been working on at least 5 years now, and I'd like to get something there before the TIF district's closed. Get us some money back, whatever we can. I like the idea about public restrooms and stuff, but I'd rather see that I guess in other locations up more towards Rotary Park and things, but it's definitely a discussion we should continue another time, I think, but I don't know if this location would be best for that, but I'll be supporting this, I guess.
Thank you. Alderperson Kittleson.
Okay. Rebuttal on your comment
Yep, absolutely.
about you go into this and then not thinking that you're going to make money out of it. But I'll still go with the fact that it's on Main Street. And to put apartments on Main Street are probably not necessarily the best idea. There's a price in here of the value of that property, and if I'm not mistaken, you guys said the building would be approximately 4,000 square feet. That's kind of like the blueprint size.
Again, that was the largest, when we were looking at a single, when Peter had mentioned before about a possible commercial use building or multi-story, 4,000 was the largest single building we could put on that property with the setbacks and the access points.
Okay, and then, but the project shall have an assessed value of at least $800,000. Do you think that's possible? I'm not in this trade. I wouldn't have anything, but knowing the value of what I own, I don't see this coming anywhere near it. And if you want to discuss and hear that you're looking to have this project by December 31st, 2018, knowing how we've worked other things before, I don't see this even being approved by then. I'll be honest with you. I mean, there's hurdles, there's going to be hoops to jump through, and I think I see a hard issue for that to be done by then. I don't see the value of it being $800,000. And I really think that the city should think about cutting their losses on this, not taking 25 cents on the dollar, and doing something that's out of the box and creating something that could be very visual for the city. That's it.
Well, I can't comment on what it's going to cost him to build those 2 4 units. He's committed to $800,000. And I think he expects to get through the approval process during the balance of this year. Maybe have a full 12 months to build those 4 units, and that wouldn't be a problem. So.
Thank you. Alderperson Truill.
Thank you, Your Honor. I would encourage us to go forward with this. And again, to a couple of the comments that have been made, again, when we took this property a number of years ago and cleaned it up, we were hoping that we would see a development, even at that point, in excess of $1 million. We were thinking, as Peter had indicated, we thought it was a great site for a potential mixed use. Again, first-story commercial, second-story apartments, and some residential. We had discussions with a couple of developers that were interested about possibly even acquiring additional property, basically the rest of the Main Street block, to try and see if we could create something larger. Frankly, conditions have changed. And from a commercial standpoint, we need to only talk about a large commercial development that's on our west side and some of the other commercial space that's available. That just kind of took away the need or the increased value of this site as a commercial site. Part of my objection to at the committee level was that it was represented that Mr. Nelson wouldn't guarantee a minimum value. He had initially brought, when he first came before RDA and talked about making an offer on the property, he had indicated that he thought he could perhaps do $1 million worth of value. And so again, you look at the numbers and what that would have done for this. But as we moved forward, I think as he realized some of the setbacks and some of the space and what's there, now he's willing to sign on for at least $800,000. And again, that's where we run the rest of the numbers for where we're at. These kind of projects are challenging. I wish, and for those people that know my involvement on RDA, I've personally made a concerted effort, and the reason I know some of those square footages is I went out and had, on my dime, had plans drawn up that were used when we were trying to bring a couple of different commercial users down on that property. And there are challenges. Alderman Majewski raises a great point, in terms of the additional property. What we have here is a half acre of land. And the concern that was expressed to me by some of the developers that I had brought to look at this property is we had another lot that was taken out of that half acre. And then again, as I said, we've got this easement on the east end. And so we had a piece of property that while we might have thought it had great redevelopment opportunities when we acquired it, and I'd like to think that, you know, the council and the RDA at that time when they took this, they really were looking to clean up a blighted area. And I think that was the first and foremost goal. But then beyond that, it was to try and see what could happen on that site. But I think we had a property that wasn't very usable at that point, and so that's why I supported a couple of years ago the move to go ahead and try and acquire that other parcel that was there to square this thing up. What that also allowed us to do is have a secondary access. So we not only have a Main Street access, but now we have an access on Prairie Street. So it made the property more usable to potential folks. So. Again, I think in the end, at the end of the day, I think there were good reasons to take the property, to purchase the property, to clean it up, and I think we move forward, you know, from the standpoint of I'm hopeful that we'll end up with a project that will be interesting and actually will fit kind of this transitional commercial to residential neighborhood. To the point of concerns about the developers' other projects. One of the interesting things that happened as a part of this is as these things come up, as one of the people who sits on that other committee as well, believe me, we will have discussions. And I'm confident that there are 3 council members, 3 of us on the Plan Commission, that probably one of the first questions we're gonna ask the developer is what's the status of the past project, and looking to try and make sure that previous commitments are fulfilled before we approve another project. Having said that, as Peter said, I don't think it's appropriate to put extra conditions on a land sale here. But just as I said a month ago on another issue, rest assured, I've heard the discussion. Alderman Bartlett has heard it. Alderman Engelberger has heard it and actually was one of the folks who brought the concern about the other project. As the developer brings back something to the Plan Commission, there's certainly a heightened awareness of trying to make some things and make sure we're getting good developments here. So I encourage your support.
Thank you. Alderperson Johnson.
Hi, thank you, Your Honor. I still, if I could, I won't say the word again, but I really agreed with what Alderperson Majewski said. But I don't understand. If you guys can explain it to me, I was trying to ask a question as far as, I just really want to be sensitive to the neighborhood and the other people behind it. So there's ordinances and everything right now. And after listening to Lisa, what she said, it's like, well, it is really around other commercial things. So the apartments are probably, the best thing to do. But I don't want to shove it up right up against, so is there in our ordinances and things like that something that's going to protect the kind of like the neighborhood to make sure, or can you guys put that when you're in the planning department and say, you know what, this is really cramped, can you move it 6 feet off? I'm just asking that because of.
There are certainly setback requirements, but.
Right, and again, it's a great question, and again, that mixed, having 2 different zoning classifications next to each other will require by nature certain setbacks, being more than just the conventional residential neighbor-to-neighbor thing. But I think the other part of it is it's difficult for me to really answer all the questions because I haven't seen a plan. But I think that we certainly will be looking. There will need to be some type of a circulation plan. Quite candidly, again, the parking is a question for me. How do you get into the property? Is it underground parking? Is it a parking structure? But there'll be a lot of things that we'll be definitely have to look at, as a part of it.
And the other question is, they probably already have approval to get on 51 because of the prior gas station that was there, right? Correct? Yes. So that it's not going to just be coming on the residential street.
Right. Again, as we said, by obtaining that smaller lot on Prairie, We have a curb cut on Prairie. This property has a curb cut on Prairie and at least one access on Highway 51 on Main Street.
Thank you.
Alderperson, I keep calling you that, Matt, I'm so sorry.
It's all right.
City Attorney, direct me.
Thank you. Just on this procedural question, so as I understand it, the land is currently zoned planned business, and that will require change to a multifamily housing zoning classification to allow for this use. That'll be something that will go through both Plan Commission and Council, and so you'll certainly have the opportunity during that process to learn what kind of development would be allowable on that site if that zoning change is made. The council does have the authority during that process, if you choose to through deed restrictions, for example, as a condition of the zoning, even increase those requirements. My sense is this is going to be a pretty tight site to work with, even with existing requirements, and so if you tighten them up any more than they are, it might simply not work. But certainly that's something you'll be able to explore during the zoning process, if that's something that you want to really take a hard look at.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Further comments? Otherwise, we'll vote by roll call. Oh, I'm sorry. Alderperson Jensen.
Thank you. Just a quick comment. To Taz's point, I agree with her about the setbacks.
I'm sorry, Greg, I can't
I agree
hear
with her about the setbacks, and that's why I voted against his original buildings that he put over on Van Buren. I voted against it. I thought it was too much. However, on this one, I was at the original RDA meeting, and I saw some preliminary sketches that he was doing, and I think that if the Planning Commission does its job, which I know it will, this will be a good fit for that specific lot, especially with the plans to try and emulate, not match, but emulate the Leaf Risa, which would be kitty corner from it. So I'm going to approve this.
Thank you. Alderperson O'Connor.
I just had a question in terms of, he's committed to $800,000. The other developments, NAFA and KPW, they had contractual language that said if they fell short of that they would have to augment whatever their payment was to make sure that's a guaranteed. Is that the case here?
Michelle Aftadi in my office actually drafted the offer. Do you guys, either Scott or Tammy, do you know if there's a guarantee? Do you know if it's secured by a letter of credit? I just don't recall.
No, I don't think it's guaranteed by
think
letter of credit. I thought there was something,
was
though,
my
that if he didn't meet the requirements, that we would repurchase.
I'm not sure if, do you have the offer with you? Anyone have the offer handy?
Which one?
Can I see it?
Should be in the packet. Which one?
Is the $800,000 assessed value commitment, what's the nature of the commitment? Is it structured as a guarantee?
No.
It's not.
No.
This isn't the offer.
Yeah, no.
No, that's not the offer.
No.
This is,
May I?
yeah.
Yes, please.
Early on in the negotiations, that was our objective, to get personal guarantee on the assessed value, and he would not go along with that. So what we have in the counteroffer now is the best we could get, and that is his agreement to do it. No personal guarantee.
So it's an unsecured commitment as to assessed value. No personal
Yes.
guarantee, no letter of credit, no security, right?
And I think a part of it premised on the fact that there are those of us who believe that Nelson wants to do more business in Stoughton. And in order to do that, he has to perform. That's a little loose, but that's the best we can get.
Thank you. Council President Swedley.
Thank you, Your Honor. Well, I was just going to mention that as far as North American Fur, we didn't have a secured letter of credit from them either. We do on some TIF projects, but not on all of them. On this particular one, you know, I think what it'll come down to is whether or not he can come up with a plan that fits the site. If he does, it's going to work out. If it doesn't, we're going to get the land back. So I think that's what it's going to come down to. And based on the land sitting there for all these years and things that everybody's mentioned, I'm going to support the motion.
Thank you. Are there further comments or questions? Okay, let's vote by roll.
Kittleson,
No.
Swadley,
Aye.
Johnson,
Yes.
Reeves,
Aye.
Mieski,
Aye.
Jensen,
Aye.
Truul,
Aye.
O'Connor,
Aye.
Bartlett,
Aye.
Hirsch.
Aye.
Motion carries on a vote of 9-1.
Right, thank you. Agenda item number 12 comes from a committee of the whole. Council President Swadley.
Thank you, Your Honor. As you may recall, we had a committee of the whole meeting with the Stoughton Area School District, and one of the things that came out of there was a recommendation for us to have a joint ad hoc committee meeting with the Stoughton Area School District. And it seems like there was interest in doing that. We're looking to formally approve that. I don't know if the city attorney has any concerns or objections with us doing that. I know there were some questions about if we were to go forward with that, how open meetings laws might,
They will apply.
They apply.
how they apply, because we're looking at appointing 3 members of the council to join 3 members of the school district and the Chamber of Commerce in order to do this. And I don't know if you have any thoughts or concerns about that before we make a motion.
I could tell you that, given the nature of the organization, the fact that it's being created by action of the Common Council and presumably by the school board as well, it would be deemed a governmental body that's subject to the open meetings law, public records laws. I think those are the only things that come to mind immediately. It doesn't look like there's any kind of delegation of authority to this body. It's simply to serve in an advisory capacity back to the city council and the school board on whatever matters it's discussing, so I don't have any concern about that. They just need to follow the open meetings law and public records laws.
Okay, thank you. So having heard that, I guess I'll make a motion that we go forward to have the joint ad hoc committee meeting committee with the following people from the city council. I have Kathleen Tess Johnson, who would be the co-chair. Greg Jensen and Michael Engelberger would serve, so that would be the motion, would be to appoint those 3 to that ad hoc committee.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Swadley, second by Hirsch. Comments or discussion? Alderperson Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. This is for you. What, the co-chair from the school board called me, and he wants to get together to meet. Can I meet him one-on-one, or do we have to do just to?
This will be a 6-member body.
Yes.
2 of you can meet without having to notice it as a meeting.
Okay, Doc. Thank you.
I saw another hand, though.
So I'd like to thank the 3 that have volunteered their time to do this, as well as the 3 school board members. If you look at the minutes from the joint meeting that we had, I think it was fairly clear that one of the first tasks would be to meet within 60 days, if possible. And I think that the group wants to talk about trying to put together some sort of a marketing plan or concept or idea, some materials, work with the chamber, go through some of the past studies or things that have been done by the city and the school district, and maybe update some of those reports that we already have so they won't have to reinvent the wheel on many of these things. I know years ago I was involved and the mayor was involved with a session that we had that the UW came down here and they helped facilitate, which outlines some of the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats to our community. And I think that report, at least from a city perspective, would be very helpful to this group. It may need some updating. I know there's been some remodels on some of our assets in our community since that study was done, which only would better our marketing materials that we have. The chamber may already have some of the documents available that you would need to add to that. So hopefully this group can take the materials that are there and work efficiently, and then come back here at around the 60-day mark and report their findings, make some recommendations. And I know there will be interest in having additional joint meetings with the school district. At this point, haven't talked to Scott Dirks, the school board president, to outline when them dates would be, but certainly I would welcome any any input I could get from other council members on when they think that should occur. I'm guessing it'll be after we get a report back from this ad hoc committee, though.
Okay, thank you. Comments or questions? Guys, all those in, I'm sorry, Alderperson Johnson.
I'm going to be meeting with John soon. I just wanted to make sure that I could meet with him before I did. And we're going to talk about things, and then I'll get back to you on things.
All right, we're also having an internal meeting with Superintendent Onsteiger and others, Lana and Tammy, to identify support for that meeting. Just internal kind of stuff we need to straighten out. So, all those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed, no? That motion carries.
Thank you.
At this time, I would entertain a motion to go into closed session.
Can I just, do you want to on this one? I don't know that you really need to.
Probably don't need to.
Why don't we start and open, and then if there's
Okay,
a
they
need to
want
go
they
into
can
close, we
closed?
can.
Sure.
Yeah, it's pretty simple, I think.
I think so too. I agree. And Director Bear is here to help us with this discussion. Thanks, Brett.
No problem. Do you want me to
All right.
summarize the issue, or?
Would you please?
Yeah, so we actually have an agreement to purchase the 55 acres of land that we've been referring to as the Listle property. The title work for that property disclosed that there's an existing easement benefiting a residential house next to the property. They have like a drain field for their septic system there. So the issue for the council tonight is whether to authorize us to proceed with closing on that, take title to the property subject to the easement. My understanding is that Brett and other staff have evaluated it, so I'll let them speak to their view on the impact of the easement on the property.
Yeah, essentially the drainage field will have really no impact on our plans for that site or any future development. I think we talked about possibly putting language in there that if things progress and that property ever comes available, then we'd take ownership of it then. So as far as right now, the drainage field has no impact on where our current plans are.
Thank you. Council President Swedley.
Defer to Mr. O'Connor.
I was just going to make a motion to approve resolution purchase 55-acre parcel subject to an existing easement, resolution 120-2017.
Second.
Alderperson O'Connor.
Well, as Brett talked about, is an easement for a septic system, and we talked about it in finance and approved it unanimously.
Thank you. Alderperson Bartlett.
I just wanted to ask, what's the status of the adjoining property that we have to take with the eminent domain?
The house that we've been working on, so the relocation plan has been completed. It's been submitted for approval and approved by the Department of Administration. We have our appraisal report completed. Those have both been delivered to the owner, as I understand it. We're now in a 60-day waiting period, I believe, waiting for the owner to determine whether they want to have their own appraisal report done on independently or waive that. Once we kind of get through that next step, that their opportunity to have an appraisal done, we will then discuss what offer to make on the property.
Okay, thank you. Comments or questions? Okay, Resolution 120, we'll vote by roll.
Bartlett.
Aye.
Hirsch.
Aye.
Gittleson.
Aye.
Swadley.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Reeves.
Aye.
Mieski.
Aye.
Jensen.
Aye.
Truel.
Aye.
O'Connor.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Brett.
Yep, no problem.
All right, agenda item number 14 is a discussion regarding the attorney's conclusions and the clerk's findings related to the Planning Commission process and procedures relating to the demolition of historic buildings. We'll start with Attorney Dragan.
Thank you, Your Honor. With the council's permission, I prepared this afternoon just some additional points that I wanted to go through with the council tonight that I think are responsive to what I think has really boiled down to the most kind of challenging issue here and the one that is of most concern to people, and that has to do with how the property can be used. So I'm just going to walk through these points. The memorandum that was included in the packet that I finished it on Friday and it was sent out Friday, I did in that memo conclude that the property cannot be used as a private park under current zoning unless the zoning administrator makes a determination that that use is allowable under the zoning ordinance. So I agree with Alderperson Engelberger and others who have expressed that concern about the use of the property. The zoning ordinance contains two land use categories that I've been able to identify that talk about parks and that describe land use categories that might apply to a park. One is called passive outdoor public recreation and the other is called active outdoor public recreation. And those are both actually listed as permitted uses in the central business district, which struck me as kind of strange, but nonetheless, that's what it says. Can you scroll up on that, Lana? Okay. The zoning ordinance describes both passive and active public recreation land uses that occur on, in terms of defining those uses, they both define those as uses that occur on public land. And so, in my view, the use of private property for those uses, it's just not listed right now as a permitted or conditional use. So, for purposes of discussing private park, because that's the term that I've heard used, when I say private park, what I'm talking about is property that's privately owned, but that's being kind of held open to the public for either an active or a passive recreational use. And so if that's what we're talking about by private park, that's not an allowable use. It's not listed as an allowable use in this district. Item 6. So throughout this process, the way staff and I think, have understood the process and the application is that, can you?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Is the Plan Commission doesn't have the authority to approve using that property as a private park. That can't be approved by the Plan Commission during the project review procedure because a private park is not a listed permitted use. Use of the property as a private park also cannot be approved by the City Council using the conditional use procedure because a private park is also not listed as a conditional use. Item 8 here, this is kind of an interesting point. It's common in lots of zoning ordinances do say that just because a use is not specifically listed as an allowable use, that doesn't necessarily mean it can't be located in that district. The zoning administrator is typically given the authority and is in our code to make determinations and authoritative interpretations of the code, including would have the authority, if the process was followed, would have the authority to answer the question, can a lot in the central business district be used as a private park? But that, no one has asked that determination be made. So as of today, as I understand the zoning code, the uses that we have to work with are those that are listed in the code. If the applicant wanted to go to the zoning administrator and say, I want to apply formally for an authoritative interpretation of the code and ask you to determine whether I can use this lot for something that isn't specifically listed, they could do that, but that hasn't happened. And so those are my legal conclusions about whether this property can be used as a park. I've had a number of discussions. This particular issue has been, I think, frustrating for a lot of people. I think it's been frustrating for the Plan Commission, for the owner, for staff, and for myself, in terms of, well, there are a lot of things about this that have been challenging for us. I think everyone's been working in good faith to try and get this right. As we saw the application, I think as staff saw the application, and I confirmed again with the planning department staff that they didn't see this as an application seeking to approve use of the property as a public park, or excuse me, a private park in the way that we're talking about today, even though there was language to that effect in the application. But I recognized, as I was trying to put my memo together and address this use issue and finish it up and get ready for tonight, that I think the fact that the application says what it says about the use, it says, you know, that the owner intends to create a park-like setting that would be available to the public to use as long as they are respectful in how they use it. And as I understand it, statements to that effect about proposed use have also been made at Plan Commission meetings. I think that's put the Plan Commission in a place and the City Council in a place where they're concerned that this process is in some way approving the use of that property as a private park, which they think is inappropriate, and they're correct, that's not allowable. I think the other concern, I think the other thing that may have happened during this process is that the Planning Commission has the right to require, in the downtown design overlay district, has the right to require, you know, that the applicant provide a landscaping plan that will show what the property will look like if the building is demolished. And I think that one of the struggles has been uncertainty about the use. Are we approving a landscaping plan for something that's going to be used as a park? And I think I heard this from you at the last meeting, and I heard you loud and clear that that was a concern that you had. Are we approving a landscaping plan for a park, or are we approving a landscaping plan for something else? What are we approving this plan for? And I think that's been part of the challenge here. And I acknowledge that's been confusing for folks, and I apologize to the extent I haven't been able to solve this problem earlier. What do I recommend at this stage to try and untangle that particular problem? First, I think the planning department should notify the applicant that the proposed use of the property as described in the application, to the extent we're talking about a private park, that's not listed as a permitted or conditional use in this district, that's not an allowable use. Let's get that clear. I think we should also say that if the applicant wants a determination by the zoning administrator whether a private park is allowable, he can ask for that. We can go through that process if he wants to do that. Doesn't have to do that. I think I've come to the conclusion that the Plan Commission really can't complete its work on this application and make a decision about a landscaping plan until we've got an application that clearly addresses this issue and proposes an allowable use of the property. I think right now people are understandably concerned that they're being asked to approve a landscaping plan for a private park, and that doesn't make sense. And I think we should notify the applicant that we don't think the Plan Commission can finish that work and can determine what kind of plan should be approved without having clarification as to the land use. Next, I think the Planning Commission should table this project review process until it has received an amended application that clearly specifies a proposed lawful use of the property. Final points. I believe that the analysis in my memo regarding the project review procedure is accurate. I think it's the best I can do to interpret your code. I think it's correct. I think one of the real challenging issues here relating to use is in this question of, well, what if it's just going to be a vacant lot? How is that interpreted under your code? There's nothing anywhere in your code that speaks to that at all. My conclusion is, the only reasonable conclusion I can come to is you're essentially doing nothing with it if it's vacant. That's not a use. It's not a regulated use of property. The Marathon Station property, that's a vacant lot in the planned business district. You'll notice, well, we've got lots of vacant lots in the city. Anytime someone records a plat for a new single-family residential development, you have a bunch of vacant lots. And in no zoning district is that listed as an allowable use of property. But I don't believe there is an intent in our zoning code to make every vacant lot in the city unlawful. So that's the only conclusion I can come to that's reasonable. So if the applicant wishes to demolish the building and maintain that property as a vacant lot, I believe the Plan Commission has the authority to approve that demolition and to require approval of landscaping plan for the property that's appropriate for a vacant lot. And I will tell you that, in my view, the standards that our zoning code gives the Plan Commission to make a decision about what is appropriate for a landscaping plan are very challenging to work with because they don't provide much in the way of guidance. I acknowledge that. They speak to aesthetic and considerations and land use considerations, a couple other words that are used in there that are not necessarily real specific about what should be required. I think, and I think the holdup here has been this concern about, well, what are we approving this for? Is this a park? What is this? I know this has been frustrating for the applicant. I'm hoping that we can kind of solve this last problem here associated with the use issue, that the applicant can work with us on that so that the process can, so that everyone can finish their work on this. And thank you for the opportunity to share those thoughts before we start our discussion.
Thank you, Matt. Alderperson Jensen.
Yes, quick question. I'm looking at your final points there. I guess my question would be, just across the street here, behind the library tore down a building, and it's a vacant lot right now.
In the Downtown Design Overlay Zoning District, Central Business.
Different?
Well, again, it's the same scenario, I guess. If what you're telling me is there's a building on Main Street,
No, it's off of Main Street.
Is it-
Off Main Street.
do we know if it's in the Downtown Design Overlay
It's right
District?
on the edge. I don't think it's in it.
Well, I don't know. You know, something else that I thought was interesting as I analyzed this, if you look at the property in question now, what's the use of that property now? It's an empty building. It's a vacant building, and that doesn't match up with any uses either. But again, I came to the conclusion that simply because a vacant building, I mean, it's not being used as an office, it's not being used as a restaurant, it's not being used as a home, it's empty. I don't believe that means that it's in violation of the zoning code at this point. It's a transitional, it's not really being used for anything in the sense that permitted and conditional uses are intended to be used in a zoning code. They're intended to regulate use of land, not non-use of land.
So you could expand B to say, not only vacant lot, but vacant building.
I think that a vacant building is also not a violation of the zoning code. Otherwise, if it is, the highway trailer building is a vacant building. The Milfab building is a vacant building. I'm sure we have other vacant buildings. I don't think that we would want to say that those are now unlawful uses under our code.
Thank you. Alderperson Bartlett.
Yeah, thanks for taking another look at this, and I agree with most of what you're saying. The problem I have with the vacant lot is the important distinction here. If you look at the Marathon site, the library site, all around town vacant lots, those are vacant, presumably waiting until conditions are right to be developed at some point. The stated use of this land is, they've said they're going to leave it vacant forever, which in my understanding, at that point, if someone tells me forever, that becomes the land use. It's going to be a vacant lot forever. That's the land use that they're going to use it as. It's not waiting development. It's not being used right now, but it's taking an important piece, a commercially zoned property that can never possibly be developed again to be a developed commercial business. It's taking that off the tax rolls and off the Main Street, in my opinion. And when you say it's going to be a vacant lot forever, that's just taking that out of there, and that's declaring the land use to me. I agree with your point that, yeah, vacant lots aren't against our code, obviously, but I think, are we going to let, if the owner of the department building downtown says restoration costs are too much, or keeping the upkeep is too much, if they tear down other old buildings downtown, do we have to allow them to have a vacant lot? I don't think we would, and I don't know why we would in this case. I just think that's the land use once they say they're going to do it forever. If they said they were going to tear it down and wait till conditions are right to develop it, then I would agree. Okay, let's look what we're going to do there. But when they're just going to leave it, nothing there, that hurts the city, our tax rolls, our tax base, that hurts the downtown area to me, but.
And I think that speaks to the first, one of the questions the Plan Commission had to address here was whether to approve the demolition. And that's kind of a separate question from what kind of landscaping plan. And so.
If I may, part of
Yeah.
that determination,
Yeah.
some of them made that vote on your first opinion that they couldn't take land use into consideration. And when they made that decision of demolition, they took part of that into consideration. They didn't look at the land use.
Well, I wasn't at that meeting. One of my colleagues was there. It was spring break. I was on vacation, so I
was there, yeah.
didn't have a chance to hear the full discussion. I thought that the outline that I provided, and certainly the ordinance, identifies the different criteria that can be considered, and I think there were a number of factors that were identified, feasibility or viability of preserving the existing structure, for example. I don't recall all the details. I wasn't at the meeting. So on this question of forever is a very long time.
Well, they're saying until they pass away or pass on to
Yeah.
the family.
Yeah, but I guess I would say that if a vacant lot is allowable, I don't see, at least it's not a violation of the zoning code for the Plan Commission to approve that. It's not approving an unlawful use of the property. It may be something that you and others on the Plan Commission would have wanted to take into account in deciding whether to approve the demolition. But I don't believe, I mean, if a vacant lot is not unlawful, it's not unlawful. So you see the distinction I'm trying to draw?
Even with the time, if they were going to leave it, they have no plans to develop ever.
I don't believe no, I don't, I think if a vacant, because the way I am understanding the code is, there is no time period that applies. I mean, how long before, when would you cross the line? 6 months, a year, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? There's nothing in there that would help us on that. And my conclusion is that if the land use is, there's nothing happening on the land, it's vacant, then it's not a regulated use, it's no use. Now, am I right about that? Best judgment I could come to. I don't have an alternative way of addressing that issue that makes more sense to me.
Thank you. Dennis Kittleson.
We didn't say forever. We said as long as we're alive. We're not alive forever. And the other thing is, it's still on the tax roll. I'm paying property taxes on it. So, I mean, as far as that goes, for you to say it comes off the tax roll, it doesn't. The word forever wasn't used.
Your assessed value will go down, won't it?
Pardon?
Will your assessed value go down once it's demoed? Will it reduce your taxes?
Well, I'll be honest with you, I've already talked to, who's our appraisal company?
Accurate.
They have no idea. Nobody has any idea. And the only thing I can say is I didn't realize we were going to open up this big can of worms. And what I will say as a citizen to the council members and the city is you might want to start taking some time, spending some money with the attorneys, whether you use this or somebody else, and open up your book and start going through all of them. Whether it takes 2 years, 5 years, whatever, but start addressing these issues. Yeah, we might have a lot more coming up, and it makes it tough when all of a sudden we're stuck. And some of you people remember when we started this, and it has been quite a long time. That's all I can say.
Thank you. Council President Swadley, and then Majewski.
Okay, thank you, Your Honor. Well, I have a number of things. First of all, we'll start with what you have on the board there. You said the zoning administrator could make a determination.
Yeah, section 78-911 of the code authorizes that.
Is there any criteria for that?
There are, but they are mostly things that he's not allowed to do. So, for example, it says, well, I brought it with me. I'll just give you one example.
Okay.
So here's one example. No interpretation shall permit a land use listed as a permitted, as a use permitted by right, a special use or a conditional use in another zoning district if the use is not listed as permitted in the zoning district of the subject property. That's one example. There are also other standards and requirements. There's a requirement that the zoning administrator articulate public purposes underlying the standards for which an interpretation is required, articulate the actual impact of various proposed interpretations. So there are some things that are required to be done. And then under this, or there are some standards that govern the decision-making process. And then once a determination has been made by the zoning administrator, that can be appealed to the Zoning Board of Appeals. So if the zoning administrator, if the applicant said, I'm requesting an interpretation, the zoning administrator comes back, says, here's my decision, the applicant could say, I disagree with you, I'm taking it to the Zoning Board of Appeals, and then they would make the final determination.
Who would that be?
I don't know, who's on your Zoning Board
We
of
have a
Appeals?
zoning board of appeals.
Okay.
We do have one.
Okay. So then, as I read through your review in the packet,
Yeah.
there was, quite honestly, a few things that confused me, and so I'm looking for clarification. I guess the first question is what application is required for demolition of a property?
So under the zoning code, as I understand it, you need project review approval.
Which is,
That's under, and the application, and there are specific application requirements in your zoning code that relate to project review approval. What the planning department has been using as its form for that is the conditional use permit application form. In my view, that form isn't particularly well suited to the task. And what we ended up doing here in this case was then going back to the applicant and saying, we need additional information that you've not provided. And then I went through and I just listed, here's what the ordinance requires. You need to submit this and this and this to gather the rest of the information that the ordinance says is required.
so, and that's where I'm confused, because in one area you mentioned that they completed a conditional use permit.
The office used the city's standard CUP application form. You don't have another form created for this process specifically.
So what was the form that was used by the previous owner for the demolition? That was a building
I
permit
think
form?
that was, I think the form that was used initially by Mr. Homar, it was a building permit application form, not the CUP application form.
So where I'm confused is whether or not we have an appropriate form, and if we did, if that form was used, because we had one applicant that used one form and the other applicant used another form to try to accomplish the same thing. And to me, that throws up some red flags. So I guess that's where I'm confused on it. I mean, it seems to me that the initial applicant filled out a form that was basically a building permit, and that was the appropriate application
And
of the two to be used for a demolition, and the applicant that the most recent owner used was a conditional use application, which wasn't even relevant to what he was trying to do there, other than to get conditional use.
So here's my understanding. Again, we don't have the planning staff here, but if someone is seeking approval from the city to demolish a building outside this special district, I believe that it's the building permit application form that's used to seek approval. I think that's what the office uses. We can verify that with them. That's how this process started. After the first plan commission meeting on this matter, January 9, and the plan commission asked for me to weigh in on some questions. As I understand it, after that meeting, the planning department decided that it should require the applicant to submit a new application using their standard conditional use permit form. This is part of the confusion here because the ordinance says you have to follow the procedure for getting a conditional use permit, so they interpreted that as we should use that form, even though that form doesn't specifically ask for the information that your ordinance calls for in a project review process. So could there be a better form? I think so.
Well, I guess that's what I'm getting at here is to me, the most important thing is not whether the building remains or it's tore down or if it's a private park or whatever. To me, the most important thing is the process. And after I read this, and I've kind of followed this thing on and off for the past several months, we need to fix the process here. And that's kind of what frustrates me the most about this whole thing, because we've spent, between the planning commission, the council, we've paid you, we've had the applicant, we've probably spent hundreds of hours discussing this, and we have other business we need to take care of. And it seems to me that the logical thing to do is really to try to find a way to reach conclusion on this. And that may mean we have to start over to do it, but in order to do that, we need to clean up our process and our procedures and potentially even our applications.
Well, so I think they're kind of, do you want me to respond to that?
Yes.
If you would, I'm just trying to figure this out.
Yeah, no, I share, and I think that frankly, the zoning department also shares your frustration on this. It's a complicated process. The ordinance itself doesn't necessarily or specify or require that you have a specific application form. It just describes the information that has to be provided. I believe, it's my understanding that at this stage of the game, with the exception of getting this clarity on proposed use, which I think is still a problem in the application, because it talks about using it as a park, which I think has raised some real concerns. I think the applicant has, and then of course we're hung up on the landscaping plan, so we don't have that piece of it completed yet. I think the zoning staff at least would say that the other information that is required has been provided. That's on this particular one. I see lots of things in this code and in this ordinance and in other ordinances that could be improved upon. So you'll have to decide exactly, how you want to approach the improving the ordinance itself and our forms and procedures going forward. But on this particular application, I think the information has been presented. We need to fix this use issue problem, and then we need to deal with the landscaping issue. I think that's where we are.
So I'll try to finish up here quickly. One of the things you said is it's possible that the applicant could amend their application. And what bothers me about that is I'm not even sure the application that's been submitted so far is an appropriate one. So I don't know if amending it is the solution either. I know it's an option. I don't know if you have any thoughts about that.
Well, one of the things that we are going to have to decide is whether, and I think I know what direction I would lean on this, is whether we get an amendment to the existing application or a new application with new information. In either case, I'm not sure this is legally required, but I think I would recommend that we notice another public hearing, have another public hearing, because it will be different information that everyone's going to have at that point. There's going to be a different understanding of the facts. So I think I would recommend that. I think the Planning Commission and it's really the zoning administrator's responsibility under the code to make a determination about whether we have a complete application or not. So certainly that question can be put, and I am sometimes asked to provide assistance on that. I think at this stage, either a new or amended application would be okay, but I'm still going to recommend a new public hearing.
Okay.
Thank
And
you.
and that gets to the point, and I'll get to the last one here. So the other issue for me is, and we had this conversation at the last meeting, is the ordinance says that, you know, the conditional use permit process should be first, and then the project review. And as I read your...
Well, I disagree with what you just said. It doesn't say
Well,
that
it's-
first you have a conditional use process and
It's
then you have
listed
a...
first in the ordinance.
No, it's not. And again, I really don't like arguing with you folks about this.
Well,
I did.
no.
We could end up with different conclusions about it. I gave you my opinion. I worked hard on it. I did a rigorous analysis.
I know you do. We see the bills. We know
Yeah,
you're putting the
yeah,
time
and-
into it.
And I really tried to stand in your shoes and understand your perspective on this, and I still came to the same conclusion. Your ordinance describes in multiple sections, including before any reference to conditional use permits, specifically delineates the roles of the zoning administrator, the landmarks commission, or the plan commission. Nowhere in this ordinance, in the design review provisions, is the common councils mentioned, period. No reference to common council whatsoever. There is reference to the conditional use process. I agree with that, but for the reasons given in my memo, I believe that the intention behind the ordinance was to say that the landmarks commission, the plan commission, the zoning administrator are the decision makers. The process to be followed is conditional use permit. I wish the drafter had not done that because that's created all of this confusion about what the process is. We now have two conflicting provisions. They have to be reconciled. I believe the appropriate reconciliation is you go with the more specific language than the more general statement. I also was asked to consider the use of the word shall follow the conditional use procedure. But it also says the Landmarks Commission shall serve as a recommending body to the Plan Commission when it's a local landmark. That's not part of the conditional use process. It also says the Plan Commission shall be the final, make sure I get the, shall serve as the final discretionary review body. So again, it
On
says
the
shall.
demolition portion. And I agree with that.
On project review.
I agree with that. The way I read the ordinance, and you can disagree, is that once the planning commission makes a recommendation to the council on the use of the property, and the council says, yep, looks good to me, then the planning commission still reserves the right, if it needs to be demoed, in order to get to that conditional use. That's how I interpret that.
My question is, and I understand that we're bringing the use back into the discussion. I don't understand why the Plan Commission or the City Council have to approve the use of the property.
That's what the ordinance says. And I think you and I agree, and I've advocated for this for months, that we need to have you more involved in our leadership team meetings to have these kind of conversations, to clean up our ordinances and our resolutions and our policies, so we're not spending all this time sitting here trying to wordsmith. And I think that's one of the things that has frustrated me, not only now, but in the past and on many issues, and things get sent back to committee because of that. And one of the things that I hear out in the community is the council needs to operate more efficiently. This is one of the reasons why we don't, because it's very awkward. We have a very engaged council, which I consider a compliment, even though it creates long meetings and a lot of headaches along the way for all parties concerned. But I think at the end of the day, people at least say, you know what, they're doing their work. Now, I'd like to be able to do that more efficiently, and I think the way to do that is to have more conversation along the way, more of the joint meetings, so if there's an issue related to public works and for public safety, those two committees are communicating. Same thing with the RDA and the finance, or the RDA with the council, or the planning commission with the council, or landmarks. That's, I think, how we make things more efficient. And I say we start now. you know, and on this one here, I just think it's time to reboot this whole thing and try to get it right the next time, because this time around, for various reasons, including the way our ordinance is drafting, is creating a situation that we just can't do it right.
Okay, I have Alderperson Majewski and Truul. Alderperson Majewski.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I agree, you know, things a mess. I apologize to the Kittlesons for having to go through this. This is not their fault. They did not ask to be in this kind of a quagmire. This is totally on the city for operating in a vacuum when it does its ordinances, not running them through all the necessary committees and everybody who should be looking at them, including the lawyer. So I'm sitting here and I'm listening to this, and I've read the opinion, and what I'm getting is, I think, not sure, my opinion, not too confident on this writing. I got a feeling that this may be heading to court eventually, and with that thought, I think we need a second opinion. I think we need to have outside eyes look at this. Somebody else who's not going to be just saying, and I'm saying this respectfully, I'm not saying this to be just flippant. Someone who's concise and can give us some really good determination. I mean, we have a spaghetti ordinance right now. You know, things are intertwined. Things are, you know, I think the intention for this was for this to do that. We don't have forms. We don't have the procedures down. We have 3 different things going on at the same time, and they conflict with one another. We need to, and I agree with President Swadley, you know, what we really need to do is vacate the entire thing and start it from scratch. Unfortunately, we have somebody who is right in the middle trying to get something taken care of, and we can't give them an answer because we really don't know. So I think we do need a second opinion. I think we need to have this looked at, and I think until we do, I don't think we can do anything.
Okay, Alderperson Truul.
Thank you, Your Honor. Matt, one other question that as a part of this, and that is whether we require the applicants to go back and file a new application, and or as you're proposing the public hearing, how is that affected by I don't recall the date, but in the course of this process, this body has now passed a moratorium on demolition. So if we start over, does that revert back to the fact that this is a moot point because this body has put a moratorium on demolition, on all demolition permits? That's been part of my challenge as a part of this because I don't recall, it was earlier this spring, certainly as this and the highway trailer building were going forward, and so we have. I'm just wondering what that effect of this application is, because frankly, that was part of the question why Alderman Engelberger and I were asking the question about whether the initial application started the clock. You know, that it happened before that action. Again, on January 24th is when the conditional use permit application was filled out. I was trying to look back and try and figure out the minutes.
Lana has it for you.
As to when the moratorium was passed.
Do you have that, Lana?
But that has certainly been put in place as this process has been going on. And so I need to understand the impact of that based on your recommendation to either reset, allow the applicant to reapply or modify their application or whatever.
More good, difficult questions. So first, I don't recall the specific language of the moratorium.
Yep, it's on the.
I can't read that.
It's
No
too
further
little.
applicant request
Make
for
it
demolition
bigger.
of any structure within any existing CUD.
Here, let me crank her up a bit.
And the date was when, Anna?
March 14th.
Sorry?
March 14th.
Okay. So again, the conditional use application, whether it was right or wrong, the applicant did apply prior to that moratorium going in effect.
Yeah, and so what we're talking about now is a doctrine that's called the vested rights doctrine. And the question is whether the applicant has a vested right to a determination based on the ordinances were in effect at the time their application was submitted. At the risk of sounding like, there's things that I still don't know the answer to, I'm not entirely sure how to answer that question, because I think in the vested rights analysis, one of the questions is whether the applicant had submitted a complete application that met all applicable legal requirements in order for rights to vest. We also have a statute now on this, so before I would want to give an opinion on whether the applicant has a vested right or not, I'd want to take a careful look at that.
And again, if I could continue, so again, one more time, the date of that moratorium was what?
March 14th.
And when would it effectively have been? That was the night that the motion was taken. When does that become effective? Is it recording after that? I guess my reason for bringing it up is, as someone who was at the Plan Commission and was part of the discussions, we then took the matter up, and again, notwithstanding the discussion about the potential future use, it was what, April 10th is when we authorized the demolition permit and went from there. So that was, I know at least during the course of discussion in my part with plan staff, we were trying to make sure there was a discussion about whether the moratorium that had been put in effect required us either not to take it up or didn't allow us to take it up. And at that point, I was part of those questions, and I was told that we're led to believe that, again, we needed to follow, any whatever the conditions were at the time of the application. And so again, your vested rights that they had the right to do it.
Yeah, there is a vested rights doctrine. There's a statutory right to have your application judged based on the rules in effect at the time you submit your application. I think if we ended up litigating these issues, I think we'd be looking at how the vested rights doctrine applies to this specific application. I think we'd also be looking at whether that moratorium is enforceable. Those would both be issues that I think would be on the table.
Because again, part of our struggles back in April and since then really have been a case where at that time the Plan Commission on a 5-to-1 vote voted to move forward and award the demolition permit. But the lengthy discussion was about the use, was about the landscaping, was about whatever.
Right.
And obviously that was a part of the ultimate motion. And I think, at least for me, and I think for some of the other members that were there that evening, the thought was, okay, if we're thinking we're going to get a public-private park or something on that gave us a direction for what we might be looking for from a landscaping. Then there were subsequent discussions about the specificity and the like. I mean, frankly, if the application, if they had been given direction at that moment, if the applicant had been given direction in that moment to say, look, you can't have a park, our landscaping discussion would have been a moot point. It would have been for a vacant lot at that point. And so we went from there. And so that's the other concern I've got about, again, I get it, we've got issues, we've got to figure out what's up here, but my specific question for you in terms of your current recommendation is, again, whether we require the applicant to put another new application in and or just requiring a public hearing. Does that in any way bring this into play in terms of the moratorium? Because, well, that's my point.
Well, so those can be really difficult questions to answer. And it might not matter whether it's an amendment to the application or a new application. That may not be dispositive. So the existence of the moratorium combined with this question about the need to deal with a statement in the application about the proposed use that seems to be inappropriate has created a real conundrum here. And
the follow-up to that is I believe this is going to be on our agenda on Monday evening.
Yep.
And if the applicant need only modify their use.
Their application form.
Right.
To clarify on use.
Right.
And typically, and I've been through countless proceedings involving applications like this, where, as a matter of course, the staff and the planning commission, not only at this city, but in other communities, would allow an applicant to amend an application. And in fact, would proceed to consider an amended application even without an additional public hearing. But I'm recommending a public hearing here, not because I know that it's required, but because of the concerns that have been raised about how this particular application is being handled and whether we're following all the rules. I wouldn't want to find us in a position where we're questioning whether the public has had a right to be heard on this now that we have new information. So, and there are more legal issues that we could evaluate here if you either need to or want to.
Well, and again, not to drive this too far, but once again, whether you are requesting that at a point of having if you're requiring potentially us to have another public hearing.
I'm recommending.
If it's predicated by the applicant changing the anticipated use, removing the fact that there's a park or any kind of public, whatever that is.
That's also recommended.
It just goes back, it defaults back to the demolition permit, which previous plan commission has approved. So in terms of your public hearing at that point, what is the public's right or public interest that would be served at that point if we're no longer proposing, if the applicant were no longer proposing a public park or anything else? It's just vacant land.
Great question. And it may mean that the whole question of the approval of the demolition can be reopened. I mean, I know the resolution that was voted on in April, the resolution says, be it resolved by the Plan Commission that the application for project approval to demolish the structure at 305, 315 East Main Street is approved, contingent on the applicants bringing a detailed landscaping plan back to the Planning Commission for approval.
So again, if it's just to demo the building and it's not a public park, that's been part of our challenge from the standpoint of the Plan Commission. We obviously have other interests because there have been other members on the that have come on the Plan Commission now that have that would have voted differently. And so we've struggled with the whole discussion about what are we actually reviewing? What's our standard by which we're dealing with the landscape? If at the end of the day it's demolition and it's vacant land, that would have changed our Plan Commission action previously. I mean, again, it was totally the need to continue to review a landscape plan was based on a impermissible use. And so again, if the applicant says that's not going to be the use, this doesn't fall under our point system for landscaping, I don't believe, in terms of going back to a vacant land. So there is no...
The standard you have is extremely vague.
Well, and could the Plan Commission at that time require them to provide a detailed landscaping plan?
Well,
was the Plan Commission, and I'm just asking, I'm wondering, were they asking for something that they couldn't ask for?
No, the project review regulations in the ordinance specifically require a landscape plan as part of a project review application. This is a project review application. So I think that there's no question that it was a required element of the application.
But how does a vacant lot have a landscaping plan? I mean, you talked about the RDA site. There was no landscaping plan there. It's just a vacant lot.
The
I'm just
Marathon
wondering.
Station?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that never went through project review approval on the demolition of the gas station. It wasn't in the downtown design overlay district.
Thank you.
But I think the important question that you're asking is the question of approval of the demolition now also have to be addressed fresh with the clarification, I will call it, in the application or change in language, whereas before it talked about a park-like setting of open to the public, if that is now going to be changed and is going to characterize the proposed use as a vacant lot? I think that's a fair question, and one that we would need to answer before the Plan Commission tackles this, so you have some direction on that issue.
Alderperson Hirsch.
On your memo before, what was the other, you were talking about there's like a passive park, but that has to only be public use? Can't be a private use?
So the ordinance has two different land use categories that seem to be kind of park-related. One is passive outdoor public recreation, and the other is active outdoor public recreation. Those are both permitted uses in this district, but the ordinance defines both of those uses in a way that says that these are uses that take place on public land, suggesting that what is allowed clearly is those uses on public property. It doesn't say that those uses are allowed on private property. Now, in my mind, if the zoning administrator had to make a determination about whether passive recreation is allowed on private land, I think that would be a hard call, because the use itself, it's the same thing. I mean, if you imagine a family is sitting down having a picnic, that's the use. What difference does it make who owns it? But again, and that's not my call to make.
But I mean, the earlier suggestion, and forgive me, the earlier suggestion this evening about the possibility of, back to the marathon site, perhaps being public restrooms or things like that, that would qualify most likely on a public property with that might be the kind of things you're talking about. That would either be a passive or active.
Well, I don't think
if we
that,
if we had, you know, if we were really opening the property up for public use, and
if that's publicly owned land and what we're putting on there is a public restroom, we'd have to look, where is that institutional? Is that that doesn't sound like active recreation to me, but
I just meant, you know, from a standpoint of that property.
Yeah,
that would have qualified potentially for what you're looking for, because it would have been public.
yes, if you wanted to put a passive recreation on, and again, I read the code and I'm asking myself, why do we have in the central business district active recreational uses as a permitted use? Doesn't make any sense to me, but I mean, that's what it says.
Well, we do, we have Rotary Park, which would be an active recreational use.
Is that in the central business district?
Yeah.
Maybe.
But I think Alderperson Reeves brought up this the other day. What is the designation of the lot, that memory, on Page Street, that's that memory garden or that other garden, is that public land?
It's a park, it's public land.
Somebody know what that is?
It's
talking
public,
about
but private people are in charge of it.
We have a volunteer who's been integral in the design of the park as well as maintaining the park.
Okay, so but that is public
It's a park,
property.
yep.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Yep.
Damn, thought I had it for you.
No, it's not Pizarro's.
Oh, I know, but I thought it was their property.
No,
I think they,
it's been a city park for years and years. It's sat as a vacant land with nothing on it.
The city
for many
owns it.
Years, absolutely.
I don't think it was
It
big
wasn't
enough to
vacant, it
build
was
on, wasn't that the
unprogrammed.
issue?
Huh?
I'm sorry. All right.
It what?
It was unprogrammed public land, it was not vacant.
Program, what's that?
Unprogrammed is land that's owned by the city that is not being currently used for a specific use.
Oh, okay.
Like our chairs.
All right, I
So
think,
could we ask the zoning person to look at the
Passive recreation to determine whether it's allowable.
yeah.
The city council is one of the parties that has the right to request determinations by the zoning administrator. Under that section of the code that allows the zoning administrator to make interpretations of the code, it's the plan commission, the city council, the applicant or landowner and the zoning administrator himself or herself can initiate that process. So, yes, the council could request a ruling, a determination.
You could, but boy, that's putting an awful lot of heat on one city employee.
Well,
I mean, this thing has been going on since January.
but if that moves it forward, I mean, our hands are being tied here. You know, if city council doesn't ask it, but then the applicant asks it of the zoning administrator, it's the same thing, right? So what are other choices? A vacant lot on Main Street doesn't sound like a good option in a historic area. So,
Yeah. Our agenda item is listed as discussion only tonight. We can always look to Matt on that one, but that's how it's been identified. Alderperson Swilly.
Thank you, Your Honor. So would it be appropriate to ask either the city attorney or staff or somebody to come back with a list of options on where we can go from here? One option may be this passive. Another option may be to amend the application. Another option may be to just start all over with a new application. And then another option may be to get another opinion. And there may be some other ones out there that we haven't discussed. Because right now, we're not getting anywhere. So the question is, you know, can we come back here or come back to the planning commission with some options on, you know, where we can go from here, so we're not having the same conversation, you know, 2 weeks, 2 months, and 2 years from now on the same topic.
If you want me to come back to, I mean, this thing's next showing up at the Plan Commission next Monday.
Next Monday.
Yeah. And so I think it's appropriate for me to work with staff to at least try and make sure that steps are taken between now and then to communicate with both the applicant and the Plan Commission about, I mean, the things that I'm recommending right now, unless the council says, no, don't do those things, I would want to recommend that we communicate with the applicant about the need to address the use issue in the application. I would want to recommend to the Plan Commission that it not complete its work on this matter, it not act on the landscaping issue until it has that issue resolved, the use issue. And I'm hearing from at least one member of the Plan Commission a question about, and I think this is likely to come up, is the question of demolition itself now something that we have to review again and make a fresh decision on? And I'm hearing questions about the impact of the moratorium on this process. So, and we are, yeah, those are more questions, and they're not, and some of them are difficult questions. I think the moratorium question itself is difficult. I would ask the council, do you want me to evaluate only the vested rights issue? Or do you also want me to evaluate and render an opinion on whether the moratorium itself is enforceable? Or just assume that it is? So, and maybe the Plan Commission needs to, next week, table this matter until it gets some direction on some of those kinds of questions.
I was just going to offer up, the Plan Commission packet has not gone out yet, and as chair of the Planning Commission, I can simply not have that item on the agenda until we've had further discussion.
Unless the planning commission would like to, maybe they have some other ideas on how we can move forward, maybe not act on anything, but at least continue this conversation, but maybe you don't have any interest in doing that, I don't know.
I wouldn't take it back to Plan Commission at this time. There are too many unanswered questions. It's
Yeah,
not,
and I guess
it's
that's
not appropriate.
from my perspective, that's part of what our challenge has been. And again, the fact that we now have a different makeup on the Plan Commission, so we've got folks that are struggling to try and balance their personal beliefs with what they've seen for past action. And again, we're in this nebulous state where we were evaluating the landscaping based on some public use, realizing that it's a privately owned property. And like I said, the flip side of this is back to discussions about rights and lawsuits and things like that. It would seem and that was part of my concern when we took it up back in April, and that was, I was led to believe that based on the applicant's rights, that we were evaluating it based on the conditions that were in effect at that time, prior to the
Prior to
moratorium.
the moratorium.
Yep.
And that was certainly my understanding of the lay of the land.
And I would argue on some level that if what you're recommending automatically requires this to start all over again, and thereby that it would seem at a minimum to your question, and I can't speak for everybody, but for me, you can't take one of those questions without taking both. You have to deal with the rights and the validity of the moratorium. Because I think short of that, we're doing a disservice, you know.
Yeah. And so I guess the question to the council is, do you want now to invest in an evaluation of the validity of the moratorium and the question of whether the applicant's rights to a decision have vested at the time of the January application, or whether we're starting over in a sense and therefore potentially would be subject to the moratorium?
Okay, Alderperson Mayeski.
I'm just curious, does the planning commission have a mechanism for reconsideration?
Yes.
Just like any other.
Yes.
Because you were saying that some of you have a new makeup and there was a struggle going on. So you may want to do a reconsideration of the demolition.
Or not.
Or not.
Yeah, you can only do that the following meeting, if I'm correct, according to Robert's rules. A motion to reconsider must follow at that next meeting. All right, so I'm understanding, I'm going to take a big consensus poll here, but I'm hearing a consensus or an interest in having Attorney Dragney not only look into the vested rights of the applicant at the time of the application, which was back in January, but also to look at how does all of that fit into the moratorium that came into effect on March 14th.
The validity of the moratorium.
The validity of the moratorium.
Put it in effect.
Yeah, I paraphrased, I'm sorry. Yeah.
But that doesn't get to any of, like, President Swadley's questions of process, due process. So when we move forward, we're still in a mess.
Well, I think if the applicant is required to reapply, the reapplication must be made on a different form. Staff used the best form that they had available at the time, and if we're now saying through this whole thing that the wrong form was used, we don't have a different form. So if the applicant is being required to fill out a new form, we better have a new form for them to fill out.
Okay, so staff needs to come up with a new form. There's still conflicts with the ordinances.
And
with
Matt's working
review
with that on the Landmarks Commission, I'm sorry.
Right, so there's a lot of different.
Yep. And that, I think, is part of the thing that staff needs to sit down with Matt and work our way through.
And I'm concerned about how expensive all of this is. I'm saying, I'm not suggesting that I have an easy alternative.
I don't think anything is easy in this one.
Well, we need to make a process that can be followed for other people that are coming forward. If we don't clean up our act, we're going to be in the same process, and it might become more expensive in the future. So we need to figure this out.
Well, that's what I'm proposing that Matt works with
Right.
staff to do. I
Right.
see Alderperson O'Connor.
For Matt, does the applicant have a right? He's been told by the staff, this is the form that you need to follow, this is the process you need to follow. He's relying on that. He's been doing it for, 9 months? Is there some expectation that he's doing what he's required to do, and if we say, no, you got to start over again, is there a problem with that?
So as a general rule, an applicant is not entitled to rely on incorrect information, for example, from staff. So, for example, if staff said something that was completely wrong about the process, the applicant wouldn't be entitled to rely on that. I think we're here in a different situation. I think what happened here is that staff interpreted the application in a way that didn't raise this private park issue. They didn't see this as presenting a change in land use to a private park. They didn't understand that that's what the applicant was asking for. When it got to the Plan Commission, the Plan Commission looked at what the application said and listened to what they heard and said, that's what they're asking for. I am now saying, I understand that concern. The concern is coming from the language in the application. I think that needs to be clarified. So from the vested rights doctrine standpoint, I think I'm going to have to figure out how to untangle that mess. I mean, we have a bit of a mess now.
Well, and again, one other half pitch as a part of that, we never really, one of the questions I'd asked last time was, so we have an application, we have a conditional use application that was filed in January. But we'd asked the question about whether the original demo permit that was on a building permit was transferable because, you know, from that standpoint.
Yeah, and as you see in my memo, I said, I don't think I have to reach that question because at least as of January 24.
But if we're talking about back to which form to use and which process you're dealing with, there is an impact there.
Yes, but I think it's very clear that the initial application form, which is a one-page building permit form, did not provide really any of the information necessary under the project review ordinance process. So that was, in my mind, not a complete and appropriate application for project review, I think.
Just for clarification, an application in a downtown overlay district for demolition has never come up before. So I just want to be sure that we're not throwing staff under a steaming locomotive train here.
No, and that's not what I was
Because we're
trying
not,
to get at.
yep, exactly.
Or the
exactly.
applicants.
Exactly, well, that's
Well.
right, let's slow the train down a little bit and figure out what we're working on. I saw Council President
Sure.
Stradley.
Thank you, Your Honor. Well, and you mentioned the cost. Now, some of the work you're already doing, and we've already authorized the work with the landmarks, for example.
And I see that as really quite distinct from this particular issue. We're not talking about this section of the code at all. The Landmarks Commission is not talking about this section of the code.
Well,
Wait a minute, that's not quite right.
Yeah.
We are looking at,
Who would be authorized?
well, we're looking at a couple issues that do come under this
So,
section.
I guess maybe what you could do is, you know, in a couple weeks, we'll be having a finance committee meeting. Maybe you can present us some sort of a proposal of what you think it might take, you know, to get this done.
Well, are we talking just about the modifications to the ordinance, or are we also talking about analyzing these additional legal issues?
Well, maybe you can separate that out for us, and we can figure out what it's gonna cost and where we would potentially get the resources from, if that's what we choose to do.
I really want to wait 2 more weeks.
Well,
I mean, I don't have the answers either, I'm
It's
just saying
like-
we keep.
I don't know. It's, I would rather take my time and make sure we have the information than, you know, get partway through and decide, oh geez, you know, it's hurry up and wait time. And I feel that's what the applicant's been doing here is waiting and.
I understand, yeah, and we haven't had a chance to really talk with the applicant about the applicant's perspective on how this might move forward, what the applicant would agree with or disagree with. I'm not sure how that, that's not the purpose of this discussion at this point.
All right, so I thought we were heading in a direction, but now I hear we're looking for a cost estimate from Attorney Dragney before any work is done. Is that consensus of the group? I mean,
Well,
I
not
can't really
any
make a
work.
motion.
He's continuing to work with landmarks, so that's being done. So that
I won't
takes
meet with
care
them,
of it.
I'll meet with them in September.
September.
Yep.
And certainly, some of the issues that we've been talking about are already, I think, for example, the question of what standards should apply to demolishing a building, that's something they're looking at. I think the real questions that have some urgency are associated with the Plan Commission meeting Monday night. Should this be on the agenda?
Well, I
Should we-
think that's already a done deal. It won't be on the agenda. They don't have the information they need to make a decision. I mean,
And-
I'm looking at two
And I think,
2 members now, and I'm,
so I think, a couple of things that I think should happen. I think we should notify the applicant that the matter will not be on the agenda, that we've made certain determinations about the application that need to be addressed, and we have some legal issues that the city is going to have to decide whether you want addressed, namely relating to the vested rights issue and the moratorium. And, yeah. Because that will then inform the Plan Commission about what is it doing? Is it reopening the whole question of demolition, or is it only looking at a landscape plan?
all right, so we'll work to schedule a conference call in the morning. I'll work with Matt, I'll work with you on that after the
Okay.
meeting, all right? All right, further discussion on this one, since it is only on our agenda for discussion tonight, otherwise we'll meet.
I have one more thing to say on further discussion.
Okay.
There was some talk about second opinion.
Mhm.
Your zoning code was drafted by the Vanderwall firm, and the person who I think had principal authorship of that and who works with your zoning code the most is Mike Slavny, who was in charge of your comprehensive planning process. He's not a lawyer, he's a planner. He and I have, sometimes, we get along great, we work together a lot. We may not always agree on some legal issues, but your zoning code is very similar to the zoning code that his firm has prepared for other communities around the state. So if you wanted to get a different perspective from the person who drafted your code because you hired him to do that back in 2009, and who administers that code. Many communities, for example, don't have an in-house planning consultant or zoning administrator, and he serves in that function for many communities. So if you wanted a second opinion from someone on some of these issues, you might want to consider asking for his opinion.
You're talking about the guy who created this mess?
Talking about the guy who
Yeah.
drafted this ordinance. Yeah, and and ultimately, if we end up in litigation over this, it's judges and lawyers who end up with this, and some of the language that I see in that code, to me, is not what it should be. So, but if you wanted to find out what was in your head, Mr. Slavny, what did you have in mind here with respect, when it says conditional use process shall apply, what did you mean by that? You can ask him if you want to. Not that his opinion would be dispositive if we ever end up in litigation.
Would it be possible just to get a copy of that email, the document? I don't.
You mean the list of, yeah, I've got copies for you all here, right here.
All right.
Will you be sending that to the applicant?
I'm going to give you one now. Oh, what are you talking about?
That form there? So all this information now will we be sending to the applicant? Everything that was discussed today, including all the paperwork, will it be mailed to the applicant?
I think we're going to have to work with staff on exactly what's going to be mailed to the applicant. This document outlines what I recommended tonight. Does everyone have one down there?
But so that will be emailed to us as
Well,
council?
he's handing it to you right now.
Yeah, but can we also have it?
I would like to have it electronically.
Emailed, sure? Yep, Lana can
Lana
email
has
it.
it electronic.
Okay,
Yep.
and you can just send it out then?
Yep.
Thank you. I'll take hard copy and electronic.
And I'm going to recommend that we communicate with you.
I'm council now, so we'll have to do it at a different time,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, not now. We'll do it later this week.
Thank you.
All right. We have a roadmap. It's a bumpy one, but it
So-
sounds like we have a roadmap. Matt's going to get together with staff and myself, and we'll talk about things that's been discussed by council tonight.
So before Greg raises his hand, so, I mean, this thought about contacting Slavny, I mean, I guess I would like to know what the intent was. maybe it's not written in the most eloquent way, and maybe it doesn't even help us, but that's what I've been trying to understand, and that's, I think, what the city attorney is trying to interpret. What was the intent when these ordinances were drafted, whether they were drafted well or not? What was the intent? Because when I read it, I read the intent as being this. Somebody else interprets it as that. Or reach out to somebody that was on the planning commission or on the council when that was, when that was drafted, because I didn't even know when that was done.
But the truth is, it's hundreds of pages long, and people on the planning commission, the council are not in the weeds on that kind of stuff. That's the challenge.
All set. Alderperson Johnson and then Majewski.
I'm concerned about having it go back to the gentleman that you had mentioned, because it's not what he had in intention, it is what and how it reads legally.
Legally, that's correct.
So why spend time as a layman asking we're giving somebody for his opinion? These are legal documents, and get somebody who knows how to read that mumbo jumbo.
Alderperson Majewski.
She took the words out of my mouth, basically. Yeah, this is a legal document. Intent means nothing. It's exactly what black and white is on the paper, and how it is spelled out. Intent does not mean a thing.
Well, I think
we need.
Go ahead. I'll let you finish, and then I'll comment.
If we're going to get a second opinion, I'd like to have a legal second opinion, and I motion that we look for a second opinion on this matter that be recommended to us by next council meeting.
Define this matter.
This matter being
I mean,
the ordinances, which is basically a spaghetti, which we've been talking about all evening. Ordinances 78 and the other.
So a second opinion on the same questions that I've addressed.
Yes, because like I said, no disrespect intended. You're not sounding really confident over there. And I've got a feeling that we're going to find some gray areas in between these two that will hopefully be clarified from what everyone else is thinking and what your opinion is.
and do you have an opinion on who you'd like to have that opinion?
Excuse me?
And do you have an opinion on who you'd like to ask for the second opinion, or are you just
I do not know at this point in
comfortable
time.
with us choosing someone to move forward?
Somebody who I can get back to you on that.
Okay, yeah, because I don't know where to look, to be honest with you. Others may. Alderperson Jensen.
Move to adjourn?
Well, there's
You
a
have a
motion.
motion on the floor.
Oh, no, I can't have a motion on that. That's point of order. Can't have a
That's
motion
right.
on there because it's a discussion item.
It's a discussion item, yep.
I don't know if that limits us.
I think the discussion was on my memo. I think if the council wants to get a second opinion on the issues I've addressed, that I don't see a problem with that.
I'll second it.
Okay, comments from the council.
Yeah, I have a few.
All right.
So I seconded it. We can have the conversation, but I do want to get back to the other gentleman, and it wouldn't be so much to make a legal opinion on this, because obviously he can't do that. But if we decide to go forward and,
You're talking about the motion to get a second legal opinion?
yeah, but I want to get back to that other
Let's do this one first, if I may.
thing.
This one first.
Let me go back then when we're done.
After we're done. After we're
Before
done.
we
This one
adjourn.
first. Yep,
Okay.
this one first.
To clarify that. So the reason I seconded this is no disrespect, but we're also involved with this, that maybe having somebody from afar just look at it and say, here's what I see. He may totally agree or totally disagree or have a totally different opinion on it, but I think we do need some clarification, and we don't have that yet. I think we're getting closer to that, but maybe having a second opinion will help us get there. I know we do have another firm that we use for some other business. Maybe they have somebody on staff that can help us.
Do we want to bring this back for a cost estimate? Bring a cost estimate back, as Tammy's giving me a look saying, where's this money coming from?
I certainly think that would be appropriate.
Okay, so we'll get a cost estimate for this first. Alderperson Truul and then Reeves.
Thank you, Your Honor. To me, I think we're in terms of what has to happen with urgency, I think that what we really need to be dealing with were more of the things that Matt was calling out in his response tonight, which specifically deals with this lot, this applicant, this process that was followed for this. We're cleaning up. We're going to have to clean up the plan commission, landmark delineation, that kind of stuff, and that can take a bit of time here. But at least for me, that's what would be my recommendation in terms of the second opinion. We're talking about how we deal with this particular application and the interpretation about whether they have to start over, whether they filed it the right way, and all those kinds of things. Because, again, the other stuff, I believe we've already invested the time. We're working our way through it. We've got the right people, trying to sort it out. I don't think we need to get another law firm involved with cleaning up the inconsistencies that we have long term. So my suggestion or amendment would be that we get a second opinion, again, on this scope of work. Again, not to totally clean up all the other landmark issue, plan commission issues, and those types of things.
Okay, there's been an amendment to the motion by Alderperson Truul. Is there a second to that amendment?
Second.
Second by Alderperson Reeves.
So,
Oh,
just
go ahead,
just
Matt.
to make sure I understand, so far I've addressed 3 questions.
Mhm.
Question of whether we have this question relating to the transfer of the first permit to the applicant, or whether the applicant submitted their own application. Question of what the process is for project review. And finally, this question of use. I've addressed those 3 questions. Tonight, we've identified 2 other legal issues that may need to be addressed that I haven't yet addressed. One relates to this vested rights issue, and the other is the moratorium issue. And I don't believe I've been authorized or asked yet to weigh in on those 2 additional issues. What my intent is what I would recommend, at least at the staff level tomorrow, is that we communicate with the applicant. We say that this won't be ready for Monday night. I think I'm recommending that we ask the applicant to at least amend the application to address the use issue and explain why. I'm not sure yet how we get through these other questions that I think probably have to be answered before this can go back to the Plan Commission. Question of, are you voting only on the landscaping plan, or are you also voting on the question of demolition? And do we have a situation where now we've got a new application such that the moratorium kicks in? I think you have to know the answers to those before the meeting, or you're going to be at a meeting and there's going to be a lot of craziness.
Just as a clarification, the process that you've outlined in terms of needing to deal with the 2 different sections of our ordinances and our codes,
Yeah.
that to me is the longer term thing that doesn't need to be dealt with right now. Right now, it's specifically about this application. Where are we?
I agree.
Was the original application transferable, the conditional use, I mean, the things we've talked about tonight, and then the impact of the moratorium. Because candidly, not just because the guy is sitting across the way from us, but I can't imagine encouraging any client I would have, anybody I work with, on any other matter, that they should go ahead and modify the application today. If it's somehow, just as you said earlier, if staff or somebody gives you incorrect information, if that, in and of making that modification, it automatically throws out his original application.
Yep.
So to me, that is the most important, whether, basically talking about where we are in this process. And I think if we get some of that clarification, that can help us from a plan commission to take whatever action we're going to have eventually.
Right, so I guess my question to council. to
You're
think-
asking Matt to look into that.
Well, that's my question. Are you asking me to look at those things, number one? And number two, do you want a second opinion? If so, on what? And do you want that before this goes back to Plan Commission? And, the lawyers that you're going to be talking to, if they're at Boardman, their hourly rate's going to be way more than mine. Just so you know.
And I promise to
Clarify.
shut up since I've talked
Nope.
way too much tonight because of all the items that came before all my committees. But effectively, I think we need your determination on the two issues I asked earlier. Whether the moratorium is effective, and legal, or if we have to modify that, and then back to the other issue on the application. And again, if they modify it, do we start the process all over?
Who would have thought? Such a small thing could become such a big thing.
All right, so we have, and now you're all going to have to help me because I've lost track. Alderperson Truill is amending a motion that was made by Alderperson Majewski, seconded by Swadley, to get a second opinion on the questions that Matt has addressed in his outline and in his memo this evening. I heard an amendment by Alderperson Truill. Help me with that amendment.
That our city attorney issue an initial opinion about
The moratorium and the vested rights issue.
vested rights issue.
Okay. And Alderperson Reeves?
Correct.
Okay. Comments regarding the amendment?
And so is this separate from that motion? I mean, we could say we don't want a second opinion, but we do want them to investigate
could,
this
yeah.
issue.
Yep. I'm sorry?
Can I go to the bathroom?
No, I'm sorry, ma'am.
No, you can hold it.
Yeah,
Table it.
we've still got, quorum.
Okay, thank you.
No, my mind has gone. Yes, this is a separate motion
Right. So the first motion that we'll vote on is to ask
for a second
Matt
opinion.
for an opinion on those two issues that we started earlier tonight.
So this is an amendment, or you've made another motion?
No,
an amendment.
that was the last, to Pat's question about, do you support one or not the other?
Mm-hmm.
The first amendment, the amendment that's on the table right now is effectively, or did you merge those together? I don't even know anymore. But
I know.
That we want an opinion of our city attorney regarding the moratorium and our vested rights.
You made an amendment to Alder Majewski's request for a second opinion. So, yeah. I think we need to have two separate motions. I think we need to motion, if everyone's okay with this, let's vote on Alderperson Majewski's motion for a second opinion. If we could do that, and then have a separate motion by Alderperson Truill. Are you following that, Scott?
My challenge with that was I didn't feel that, I felt that that Alderman Majewski's request for a second opinion, I just felt that was too vague in terms of what all are we going to have someone look at. Whether it would truly be to look at the process that we're looking at, that we're trying to deal with. I was trying to amend that to tighten that up to say, look, we need to deal with this applicant right now and issues surrounding that. So that's all I was trying to tighten up the second opinion.
Right. And then you're asking Matt to answer those questions.
Matt hasn't had
Hasn't had a chance to answer those
deal with
questions yet.
anything
Right.
yet.
So we can't have a second opinion on it because we don't have a first opinion.
But as I interpreted it, the second opinion was also to deal with his opinion that he's issued tonight on other matters. That's where we started the discussion about wanting to have a second opinion.
Yes.
I thought.
That's as clear as
Take a motion,
mud,
I don't
and
care.
I apologize for that, but we have an amendment on the floor to have Attorney Dragney look at, and now I lost my spot where I was writing all this down.
Vested rights.
To look at the vested rights question as well as the moratorium. How does that moratorium fit into that application? If that's clear, because it's not totally clear to me, but if it's clear to everybody else, we'll go ahead and vote.
So you can vote yes on this one and
No
no
on the
to
other
the
one.
other second opinion.
Yes, you can. Yes, you can.
And have this one still be followed through.
Yes, yes. Yes. Because we're asking Matt to look at these 3 questions.
So, yeah, this is in the amendment. If the amendment is adopted, the new main motion will be, as I understand it, to request a second opinion on the 3 questions I've answered, and to request that I render an opinion on the vested rights and moratorium issue. That will be the new main motion. Council can then consider that. If the council rejects that motion, then you can make another motion.
Okay, got that one, Lana? Can you read back the amendment?
Well, I have the amendment, excuse me, to say that, I'm sorry.
There's a motion by
So-
Alderperson Truul, second by Alderperson Reeves.
Right, so the amendment was to have the city attorney review and issue an opinion on the city's vested rights and the moratorium, is that correct?
The applicant's
And
vested
how-
On the
rights.
vest, I'm sorry, the
The
applicant's vested rights.
Yep,
Okay, I apologize.
nope, no worries.
And that is
Clear as
separate
mud.
from the second opinion?
Mm-hmm.
I
Yep.
think somebody asked that already.
This is
I'm
the
sorry.
first motion, right. All those in favor of this motion, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That motion
Abstain.
That motion carries with 1 abstention. Takes us back to the original motion motion by Alderperson Mieski, second by Alderperson Swadley, to receive a second opinion on the questions in your packet this evening, as well as those on the board tonight, presented to us by Attorney Dragney.
And then as amended, to also get,
And to also do the vested interest
Yep.
in it.
so now it'll all be one big package. And my concern with the second opinion aspect of it is that it's not clear to me how that would be implemented. I mean, we don't know who it would be or how you're
And
going to
how
go
much
about
it's gonna
selecting
cost.
someone. Or,
Yeah. Okay, however, there's a motion on the floor. Let's deal with that first. All those in favor, oops,
I just want to
Alderperson
say
Jensen.
that I'm in favor of getting the attorney's opinion on this, but I'm not in favor of having a second opinion without knowing how much it's going to cost. There's just way too much going on, so I'm going to have to vote no.
Okay. All right. So we'll try by an aye and a no, but we may have to end up with a roll call. So all those in favor of the second opinion motion, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no?
Nope.
No.
Let's vote
Abstain.
by roll. Yeah.
Hirsch,
Aye.
Kittleson,
Abstain.
Swadley,
No.
Johnson.
Can I change my vote from the first time?
We're voting right now?
No, we moved on
Vote
to the
no.
next vote. This is
No,
on the
no,
second
this
opinion.
one.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a roll call because it was
Roll call on the
clear
same
from
vote.
before, so go ahead.
Yep.
No.
Reeves,
No.
Mieski,
Aye.
Jensen,
No.
Truul,
Aye.
O'Connor,
No.
and Bartlett.
Aye.
That motion fails, 4 to 5.
Okay, Alderperson Truul.
I would move that City Attorney Dragney issue an opinion on the validity of the moratorium and the applicant's vested rights.
Second.
Didn't we do that already?
totally
The first one?
No,
No, it failed because
would
the
ended up
original
being
motion
part of the
failed.
amendment. The way it ended up playing, it was an amendment to
To a motion.
a motion that just got defeated.
That failed.
Okay.
And I didn't hear the second. I know it came this way. O'Connor, thank you.
And I didn't mean to change my vote from the first thing, but when we never, in the.
Fine.
Okay.
Gonna let Lana get that written down, and then we'll go ahead and vote. Did you want to wait for the vote?
No, it's way past my bedtime.
All right.
I have a motion by Truul to direct the city attorney to issue an opinion on the moratorium and the applicant's vested rights issue. Correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And that was a second by O'Connor, correct?
Second by O'Connor. Mhm.
We're gonna do by roll call?
Yes.
Kittleson,
Abstain.
Swadley,
Aye.
Johnson.
I don't even know what we're voting on, I'm sorry.
It's to direct the city attorney to issue a legal opinion regarding the moratorium and the applicant's vested rights.
Yes.
Reeves,
Yes.
Mayeski, left. Jensen,
Yep.
Troll,
Aye.
O'Connor,
Aye.
Bartlett,
Aye.
Hirsch.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously
Can I make a
With one
motion to
abstention.
adjourn?
with one abstention. I'm sorry.
That's okay, yep.
Can I make a motion to
Yes,
adjourn
please.
now?
Yes, please.
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion to adjourn by Jensen, second by Reeves. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries.
Abstain.